DMT World presents The Rambling Rabbit, and I am its host, Happy KB. Welcome to The Rambling Rabbit. It's me, Happy KB, the host. So today we have a special guest, and with us is Matty580. He's been with us in the community since about September of 2024. So sit back, have a session, and I hope you enjoy the conversation between me and Matty580.
It's one of those things, and I mean, there was a lot of blame, I think with my parents growing up, and it's just my last time through rehab, everything dawned on me. Sure. I had it on my Facebook thing, on my whole intro. It was like, finally found healing through a freaking tie-dye tapestry. One of one of the BJs that was in there, totally super cool guy. So he had gotten approval years before. He was like totally into the whole tie-dye thing. And he's like, so I'm going to have to use ice instead. So he sprinkles everything in, and he, a couple days later, he brings it back to us, and, he opens it up, and this thing, I mean, it's just the most incredible thing that I've ever seen. And that's what's on my profile on DMT World.
Oh, that makes sense. I wondered what that was.
That is the center of it. That's the eye that was created by what his start was. And so all the other, you can see how everything, and everybody saw something different in it. When you see the whole thing, and I'll shoot you a picture of it then. Yeah. People are like, oh, I see a bat, I see a turtle. And I mean, it's in how the black. And he said, man, I've done these for years. And he goes, I've never seen one do this the way it's done. And so what he does with them is it goes up on display in the rehab, and then it hangs there until the very last person that had anything to do with its creation goes home. Oh. And then he puts them up for auction, and then the proceeds buys more dye, more muslin cloth to keep the whole thing running. And of course, everybody's in there, and they're like, oh man, I'm going to take that sucker home. And I walked up to him and I just said, I'm taking that home. I said, how do you, so they're not technically allowed to have contact with us. So he goes, here's my business Facebook page. He goes, technically by rules, I'm not having personal contact with you. It's my business.
Right.
So one of the other
this was when you went to a rehab, right? And this was what they utilized. Yeah. This was a therapy type thing that they did for you. Is that correct? Is that what you're?
Yeah. Yes, okay. Absolutely.
I wanted to make sure to get that because because of when I started recording this, I want to make sure people know that that's what this is when they see your profile picture, because I think that's important. Because I think this is very therapeutic, tie-dye and doing something like this and creating. I think it's amazing. So keep going. Tell me a little bit more about it.
It was, so there was another BHA in there, a young lady. And so she came in before we left and basically said that she was taking on a new job.
What's a BHA lady?
So BHA basically stands for Behavioral Health Advocate.
Oh, okay.
It's a really snazzy term for people that have two years. So the qualifications at the rehab were you had to have at least 2 years clean, and that way, if you wanted to come back and become a counselor, or not a counselor, basically the BHAs were what we dealt with all day long. They're the ones that basically gave us like our little lesson plans. They were like our chaperones. And they're just addicts like everybody else. It's just they've had some time under their belt, with sobriety. And so she said, and basically, I told these guys, I said, guys that I was in there with, I said, it's a labor of love. I mean, these people were only getting paid like $12.50 an hour.
Right.
And I'm like, bro, that's like after taxes. I'm like, you're lucky if you're making $300 a week. Mm-hmm. I'm like, and these guys full time. I'm like, they're barely meeting their bills just to be here and interact with us. I'm like, so don't tell me it's about money. And, because there was a lot of, there's always the opinionated ones. Oh, they don't give a crap about us. I'm like, apparently they do, because let me tell you what, for $12.50 an hour, I wouldn't be here.
Right. Oh, yeah.
I'm like at my age, I'm like, I'm not even getting my rear end out of bed on a Saturday if it's anything less than $30 an hour. I'm sorry. Um, it was, and so anyway, so when I got out, I saw her on Facebook, so I shot her a friend request,
Right.
and she accepted, and she's like, okay, I'm not affiliated with them anymore, so there's no repercussions for me. Well, it's like a month later, and all of a sudden I get a message from her, and she's like, hey, she said, Troy's reaching out to me to get a hold of you. Tomorrow's going to be the auction, and he wants to know if you want to try to sneak, if you want to bid on this. And
Oh,
I'm like,
oh,
and I'm
your thing
on the
here.
tie dye.
Oh,
Yes, on the tie dye
okay.
tapestry. And
Gotcha.
I'm like, oh my God. And I had asked him before we left, I said, so what are these? He goes, 150 bucks. He's like, that's about it. And he
Yeah.
goes, that's about the top of the line the bidding will go. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And so I get out. Well, I'm just getting resituated with getting back to work. I basically, when I came out this last time, I did what I should have done all the other times. And I said, I'm
Mhm.
taking a month or so just for me,
Right.
to just get my head back where it needs to be. And so I just started working, and I'm like, oh my God. So I called my boss and I said, can you loan me 200 bucks? And I explained why. And he goes, I'll tell you what. He goes, so you're telling me they usually bottom out at about $1.50? And I said, yeah. He goes, all right, let's make a statement. He was like, I'm going to give you the 200. You don't have to pay me back. And he's like, and I'm going to donate 200 as well on top of it, because
Mhm.
he's like, I think what they're doing is an awesome thing. And he was like,
Absolutely.
so I basically reached out to him on his Facebook page and said, on his business page, and said, hey, how about this? How about you just skip the time tomorrow of wasting the time of getting this auction started? Because I'm prepared to give you 400 bucks in cash right now.
Mm.
And he was just like, oh my God, are you freaking serious? And I said, yeah, I'm totally serious. And I'll see you here at the rehab tomorrow morning. And so I drove out there and gave him, and he said, you don't understand. He goes, this will buy all the supplies. He's like, this will feed this whole trauma tapestry class I do. He goes, this will feed it for the next year.
Oh my, that's good. Wow.
And, and so I brought it home. And of course, like, my boss looks at it and he's like, I'm not even going to try to understand the importance. He goes, but I know you. And he was like, and I know it was important to you. And he's like, that's all I need to understand.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
So I I usually crash in my living room. I just like it because it's got tons of windows, and especially in the spring and summer, like I have all the hopper windows cranked open and the air just blows through there. And um, so they're all blind. I have Venetian blinds on all of them, so I have it hanging in there. And in the spring and summer, when the sun's on that side of my house, it
Oh
just looks
yeah.
amazing in the
Oh, I
morning
bet
when the
so.
sunlight comes through it.
I bet
It's
so.
just, and it's like the first thing I see. And it reminds me, and that's what I'm saying, do I dwell in shame on my past anymore? No. Do I regret it? Absolutely.
So
Um,
here's my
and
question. To catch people up, you've not that you went to you've gone to rehab a couple times,
four times,
right?
four times,
How many?
four
Four
times, four.
times.
Yeah.
And so this last time when everything kind of clicked, that's when you experienced with the tie dye. So what about the times before? Do you want to talk about those?
Sure.
Yeah.
So when I went, first time I went, I was just shy of 28. So a little bit of my history here. So,
Sure.
I'm a 16-year-old
Hey,
high school
tell me
dropout.
all about it. Tell me all about it.
Yeah. So I'm a 16-year-old high school dropout. So I was just absolute rebellious, out of control. The number one thing of importance in my life at that point was just getting high, and
Yes.
disobeying any and all authority. Um,
Mm.
and So my sophomore year, at that time I think we had 180 days was our typical school year. I had already racked up 98 days of out of school suspension, um, which was over half the school year. And they basically went to my mom and said, he's going to get expelled at the end of this year. The board will sit down. They're going to look at how he's been. He's going to get expelled. And so my guidance counselor was like, honestly, if it was me, I'd sign him out now, because then the expulsion's not on his record if he decides like he wants to go back to another school.
Oh, yeah,
He was
okay.
like, it's going to be easier to get in. So I was 3 weeks shy of my 17th birthday, which in that time in Pennsylvania was how old you had to be to sign yourself out of school.
Wow.
So my mom actually had,
That kind of dates us because I remember those days.
yeah, and so my mom had to come in and do it.
Right.
And my parents, or the divorce had just basically the divorce had kind of had gone through. And my father came down. He found out, oh my God, he was freaking out and basically threatened my mom like he was going to take all this stuff away. And basically, she handled it very well. And her attorney basically called him and said, bro, you've already signed the papers. There's not a daggone thing you can do. She has 100% custody. It's his choice, her choice, and you can't do anything about it. And guess what? Yes, you will keep paying child support and you will keep doing this and that. And that's just how it is. What made him so upset is that even though I was such the delinquent, on paper, I'm supposed to have an extremely high IQ.
I was going to
Um,
say, you
and
definitely are gifted material. I can tell that. Just by some of the conversations we've had. Yeah. So dad was upset because we were not going to further our education.
he was just, yeah, he was like, I mean, he was like, the sky could be he was like, sky's the limit. He was like, you could be a doctor, a lawyer. And
Right.
I'm like, I don't want to be any of those things.
Right.
Um,
Those are all,
success for him
that was also
success for him at that.
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
The program response, because your parents are about the same age as my parents. And so like
Well,
that's the
this is,
thing that's what we were supposed to do. That's what we were been told from the get-go to
well,
do.
absolutely. And his success at that time was all based on dollar amounts. And
Yes.
to him, success was about how much money you accumulated by the time your time was up on this planet. That is
Right.
how your level of success was judged. And he has found out very hard that that is not even close to the case.
Mm.
You know, that's not how I judge success at all. I mean, money's fleeting.
Yeah.
Um, and most people that I know that have a ton of it, because I have in the past, it changes them. I don't care what anybody says. It really does.
Mm.
Um, you know, they have a real easy time of forgetting where they have come from,
Yes.
and what they started out as.
Yep.
I don't ever want to forget that. It's because that's my boss's sister asked me this one time. She said, "Do you ever wonder who you would be if you had made all the right decisions?" I said, "No, absolutely not." I said, I have no inkling to even want to know who that person would be, because I said it wouldn't be who's here now.
Oh,
I said,
absolutely.
those mistakes and all the horrible blunders that I made are what forged me into the human that I am now.
Mhm.
Which is, I mean, I'm always told, and I mean, sometimes it's weird when you have people come up and they tell you the qualities that they see in you. It's just like, oh crap, okay, because it's like really you don't see them yourself.
Right.
And I mean, the level of compassion. I mean, like, because I've been there. I mean, I know what it's like to be at the very bottom, and it's just, and I was raised that way too. I'm a really emotional guy. Like, I have no problems crying. I mean, like, and I don't give a crap if there's 80 other guys in the room. You know what? think of
Sure.
me, well,
Yeah.
I really I don't care what anybody's opinions are, and honestly, most of the time I'm like, I'm probably more man than you are because you want to cry. You just don't have the cojones to do it.
Yes.
I'm like, I'm just, because that was another thing, like, and my father and I talked about that, like growing up in his era, and like probably the same with your father, like men didn't show didn't cry. They didn't show emotion like that.
Yes.
Um,
My dad still
and
kind of doesn't show a lot of that emotion. I really have to kind of pull things. I have to really ask him questions because he doesn't give up free information much. And
right.
emotion is, yeah. My dad is a retired United Methodist pastor. And so
Okay.
the compassion is there, and the internal emotion. But yeah, he's a Vietnam vet, and he raised two kids and his wife on very little and really worked his way through it. And yeah, sometimes you have to learn to sever that emotion to just keep going. And they gone through war. My granddad went to World War II, and so they learned too, from him. You don't cry, you don't show your vulnerability. You are a man, you stay, and you stay strong. And misconceptions that with when we keep teaching that, but we don't teach people how to be emotional and that it is okay to be emotional,
Oh,
that's when we start seeing some of the breakdown that we have been seeing in our last decade or so, because people are not in touch with what's going on internally with themselves.
oh no. And when they finally realize there is something that's going on in there, because they've never had an emotional
Yeah.
click with, their inner self. They don't even begin to know how to deal with those emotions.
Right,
Um,
and sometimes I think that's where the not being able to deal with the mental part that comes along with emotions sometimes spirals people into directions that they don't know how to handle, and sometimes that's what flips them over the edge or flips them out because we didn't teach them how to do that.
I totally agree. I mean, I've seen it completely frazzle people.
Mm,
I
yeah.
mean, it literally mentally broke them, and like they were never quite the same after that. Um, you know, um, so like I said, but on the other hand, I've met people that are way, way, way too over emotional. Um,
Yes.
and
Yes.
you know, and so, and it's funny you say that about, the changes and stuff we've seen over the past couple decades. I mean, here
Hmm.
in the past, couple years, it's just all of a sudden that, one of the big topics you'll hear on other social platforms is like, about men, and that, nobody really knows what men go through being men, and
Correct.
and it's, and I'm like, well, part of that is because of how it's this ideology. I'm like, that you're this stoic thing of marble, like, it's self like sustaining system here. And I'm like, I saw a guy on an interview. He's like this, I forget what his name is, crazy old like Texas guy. He's got like this huge ZZ Top beard, and the interviewer and he said,
Mhm.
man, he's like, simple as this. He goes, men, they don't need therapy. He goes, really? He goes, I'm telling you. He goes, all they need is just a simple acknowledgement for all the shit they go
Mm.
through on a daily basis. Just to, he goes, that's it. He was like, I'm telling you. He was like, men would they start hearing this. He goes, they're not going to need to go see to therapy, and I understand that. But on the other hand, mothers go through that same thing too. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm like, this, it's not a man thing. It's like a life thing. I mean, you've got single mothers that, they've got to go to work to put food on the table. And then they've
Mhm.
got to come home and they've got to have this stoic face on in front of their children, like that everything's okay. And, when on the inside, they're just getting ripped to pieces.
Yes, it's
And
true.
I've seen my mom go through it. And when my father first left the first time,
How old were
I
you
was
when that happened?
probably 3, and
Okay.
I was about 3. Um,
Okay.
and I can remember like I know now, and I remember it more now than I did then. But I mean, my maternal grandmother, who was just, I mean, she was the if there was a poster board that all kids, I perfect grandmother would be, that's how my grandmother was be. I mean, she was just the most incredible lady. She loved her grandkids. Like if she knew I was coming, there was always my favorite treat in the cupboard. There was my favorite stuff. I mean, she just,
Nice.
and and that's where, and so
What was her
I
name?
spent a lot.
What was
Her name, so her name was
what's her
Judy.
name? Maddie, what's her
So
name?
her so her
Oh my
name was
gosh,
Judy.
that's my mom. That's my mom's name, Judy. That's
Okay,
awesome.
so my mother's name is Susan. My grandma's name was Judy. Um,
Mm.
and like I said, she divorced my mom's father, and I mean there was where I live in York. There's a little town right about 15 minutes away from us. It's called Windsor.
Oh,
And
okay,
so there
yeah.
was a little, and part of this area of Pennsylvania is tobacco was a big thing here. Tobacco was a big industry at one point back in the day, and there's still a lot of farmers right on the Susquehanna River that's here. That basically it flows from like up in New York and then it flows down into into the Chesapeake Bay.
Mm.
And so it's tobacco's still a big industry. There's still a lot of tobacco farms, and there was a little old cigar factory. It was called the House of Windsor, and my grandfather basically bought it and like brought this thing out of the ashes of like ruin, and turned it into like a multi-million-dollar company. And my father was in Vietnam as well, and he said, Matt, he was like, he was like the big thing for them was like they get to have leave and they would go into Hong Kong at the time, which was at that time was still governed. It was a British province and was still governed by British law. But he was like, there was House of Windsor cigars and shops over there. Um,
Mm.
and so my grandmother, when they divorced, walked away with some money, and she bought a farm in another little town real close to us called Hellam. It's a farm town. It's pretty much, it's one of
Hellam, is that what you
those
said it
towns where
was?
everybody knows. It's what's
Did
that?
you say Hellam? You say Hellam, the name of the
Yep.
town? Okay.
Yes. And so I could,
I
yeah.
know
And it's funny
nothing about
when I was a kid.
Pennsylvania. So like when you start putting words out, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna write these down so I can see where these are at. So
Yeah. So it's funny. I'll remember. So Route 30, which is what's also known as the Lincoln Highway. It basically goes from the East Coast to the West Coast.
okay.
So we would get on that to go to my grandmother's place, and when the sign on the road was AM. And I never took any thought into it, but I mean, had eventually went before, like just within the last 15 years, they took it before the town board and all this crap they went through to have it changed to an A instead of the E because they didn't like how, the beginning part of the town's name was hell and how it portrayed them. And I'm like, how much taxpayer money? I'm like, what portrays you?
Right.
I'm like, for real, it's not the name of the town, it's the people in it. That's what
Right.
portrays, that's what people see in a town. I mean, you had said to me, I mean, you're familiar with Chicago. And
Right.
I've never been there, but I
Never,
spent
you've
10 years.
never been there?
Nope.
We should change that.
And
We can change that.
so, but I spent a decade in New York City.
That's cool.
So when you get down into like the little shitty parts, like people don't understand, like, they think of Manhattan. It's like, they think it's this most of Manhattan is just as bad as the Bronx or slums in Queens.
Yeah.
I mean, here's all five boroughs have amazingly beautiful places that are in them. I mean, like the Bronx Zoo is just absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
The Metropolitan Museum of Art in
Yes.
Manhattan
Yes.
is absolutely incredible. You know, and that was by chance. But though you would find welcoming people, like in these little corner bodegas and stuff. But man, when you go to all these, like, and I've been to them, these big 4 and 5 star restaurants like that you see online, I mean, they're the most standoffish pricks that you have ever met in your life.
Yep.
And I'm just like, really? I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, oh yeah, the food was amazing, but the experience totally sucked. You know? And I'm just like, I'm like, no, man. I'm like, and that's, that's one of the things I've learned in life is, and that's, you say that, um, I always try to just be open and friendly with people because, man, that's how beautiful relationships are started.
Yes.
And being some, like, I swear, like when I was a kid, like I look back at my grandpa, like my dad's dad now, and well, even more so was my mom's father. Oh my gosh, I called him he was my Papa Richard, and his name was Dick Smith, and so we called him Papa.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I swear to God, I'm not going to grow up to be like how they are. And my mom asked me one time, I said, they walk around with a stick shoved up their ass. And I mean, I was like 13 or 12, and she's like, oh my God. And I'm like, well, they do. I'm like, I'm like, they're just these like stern things. And like, I can remember, like, you'd get there, and for Christmas, and it was like a pat on the head, like, hey, how the hell are you? Give you a little chuck on the shoulder. And I'm like, and that's how it was. I mean, I'm just like, wow, I'm not going to be that guy.
Right.
And I mean, this was funny. This was just like 10 years ago. I was at an event and I'm standing there and I felt something tugging on my shirt, and it was this young kid, a young boy. And he was like, Mister. And he kept saying Mister. And I'm looking at him, and all of a sudden I was like, holy shit, he's talking to me. It's like, oh my. I'm like, yeah, buddy, what do you need? And he was like, so he was trying to get to his mom and dad, and he couldn't get through the crowd of people. And so I'm like, come on. So, I got him over to where his mom and dad were. But I was like, holy crap. I came home and I'm like, so I'm telling my boss this, and he looks at me and goes, damn. He's like, took you that long to figure that out, And I was like, yeah, dude. He was like, you're 42 years old. You're an adult.
Right.
But like I look at like my group of friends and how we act at 52, and I'll be 53 in June, and I'm like, like I have some other friends, like, and I look at them and I'm like, oh dude, you so want to act like we do, but you've got to be like the proper husband and father. And I'm like, bro, I'm like, you could still be all that and still it's like you don't have to. It's weird. I mean, you've probably seen it, like all of a sudden it's like they become like uber responsible, but it's like they visualize, like you see that in them.
Right. They forget that they were at one point in time an age where they did the things, and they think that they have to change because now they have this other responsibilities, and they're afraid how people are going to look at them. And it totally changes the psyche process. And then they become, I won't say uncool, but like they become a square. That happens a lot.
That is absolutely beautiful. Square, and that they do. It's funny because I used to say that to people, like guys I work with, they would start really irritating me. And like, especially my boss's 2 kids, like they were so, like my boss is a really devout, born again Christian guy. And I mean, he's great. I mean, he's not a Bible thumping guy. But he really was strict with his kids. And I mean, and I babysat them. I've seen them from the time right after they were born. I've changed their diapers. And I mean, I'm like, I looked at him, my boss, one day, and I'm like, dude, not to make your head swell any bigger than it is. I'm like, but I was like, bro, you did an awesome job. And he's like, man, he was like, you have no idea how much time you have to be willing to just give up to get this. And he is like, and trust me, he's like, there's no guarantee that it's going to end it this way. He was like, they're still their own person. He was like, you just do the best you can to instill in them. And they were homeschooled
Yep.
for the longest time. Um,
The key
but,
is to not lie to them. The key is to be honest and still be yourself with your children. Because that's how they learn. That's how they learn to be that way too. That's
oh,
one
yeah.
thing. My kids, I'm very lucky. My kids have turned out very well as well. But that's just it. Being a single mom, like I didn't have that other person there to like, you know, sometimes parents get very the children are the children, the parents are the parents, and they keep that separate. Well, I didn't have that option. My kids just knew everything that was happening, but I was never lied to them. But I was strict with them growing up because I understood how the world was changing. I knew that there were these ideologies that were at play as they're going to go to school. You know, their community, it was evolving just like the bigger community, the adult community. And so I knew that there was going to be some trickle down, and I had to make sure that I stuck to my guns because I could have easily just lost control of my kids and they could have turned out to be like complete total assholes and just ungrateful and all those things. And they didn't, they weren't. They're very kind children. They're very thought provoking. They're intelligent. They think for themselves because of how I raised them. I look at my brother and his family, completely different. But we came from the same household. But
Yeah.
yeah, I get it. I totally get it. Changing
And I mean,
diapers.
and you're right. I mean, like when I was a kid, I mean, things are way different now.
Yes.
And you just, how things have changed. I mean, like when I went to school, I mean, we walked, I mean, it was almost 3/4 of a mile to my bus
Mhm.
stop. It was up a couple streets and then, it was behind it. What it used to be our elementary school. Um, but that's where I caught the bus,
Yeah.
to go to like middle school and stuff. I mean, and the elementary school's right there as well. I mean, when I was a kid, we walked to school. I mean, you would never, I mean, it's like you can't have that anymore.
Nope.
I mean, there was, our bus had two stops and like you walk the rest of the way. I'm like, now a bus stops like in front of every single house.
Yes.
And and
Yes.
I'm like, look, we all as adults know. I mean, there's nothing more here, and I am becoming my grandfather in some aspects. Like when I'm behind the wheel of a car, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, do you not understand? Okay, here's the deal. Why doesn't one parent a week just takes the responsibility? All the kids are in that front yard. I'm like, the bus can make one stop on the street.
Mhm.
I'm like, this is not rocket science. And
Right.
I'm like, look, you put, one child alone, yes, is very vulnerable. Put 19 of them all together.
Mm.
Let me tell you what, they're not quite as vulnerable.
Right.
You know, so, and I'm like, for God's sakes, I mean, I mean, it's
Yep.
weird. Like I can remember after I quit school, I actually went back like a couple times. Like my shop teacher and my wood shop teacher, he's the most amazing guy. He was an ex drill sergeant from the Marines.
Oh.
Um, but his name was Terry Schenberger. But he's the most incredibly gifted guy with wood that I'd ever seen. Like my sophomore year, he just takes this chunk. It was a big square of wood, and the next thing you know, it's round,
Right.
and it's like an inch and a half thick. And then for like a week and a half, he's just doodling and drawing. And the next thing you know, he's got this set of chisels out and he hand chisels this thing and turns it into this. It was a serving platter for at Christmas time.
Oh.
And it had all the pine pieces. It looked like, pine boughs. And I mean, he had all the pine needles chiseled into it and the acorns and stuff. And it was just like, holy shit. And, he had this, it was a mini Conestoga wagon. Um,
Ooh.
I don't know, maybe like 18 inches or so long, maybe a foot high.
Mm.
Um, Beautiful little thing. Well, my neighbor, who is one of my closest friends, and that's a story for another time of
Mhm.
just how it's weird. Like, and I said this to you, actually yesterday, maybe even, but it's like the powers that be, they move pieces on the chessboard, and then they sit back and they watch how we react.
Yes, I agree with
Um,
this.
it's not like it's not like there's some force governing us, but they certainly put things into play, and then they want to see how we react.
Yeah.
And I would have to say 90% of the time they're up there just like, oh Jesus, because we just screw up. I mean, I look at society and I'm just like, to me, it's what I know how it should be. It seems to me, it's so simple, but I'm just like, how in the hell can 99% of the world not see this? I'm just like, oh my God. I'm like where you look back at the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. I'm like the compassion and openness that like how people were, we were an incredibly wealthy world. Well, like we were the number one world power. And things worked. And I'm like, it's like we've lost ourselves.
Yes, we
You know,
have.
I think you look at the breakdown, and my mom, she was like, are you kidding me? She was like, when I was a kid, she's like, when you came home, you ate dinner at the table with the rest of your family every daggone night. And that's the way it was.
Yes. I grew up that way too.
And I kind of did, but it was just my mom and I. And so it was a little more lax here, but, but then all of a sudden she said once a week or so, she was like, it was a treat. She was like, she said, your grandma, we would make TV dinners and we would all sit with the TV tray, which most people probably don't. There's a lot of people that don't even know what they are. And I'm not talking I'm not talking about like the nice wooden ones they have now. I mean,
the metal ones.
Oh my God.
We had the metal ones, and there was this the scenery on it that was like it was like trees.
Thing was the designs and the stuff that were on it.
Yeah.
And she was like, and we would sit in our family room and watch like one of our favorite shows, but they did that together too. Like she was like, that was, on every Tuesday night, we would all sit in the family room and we would watch, whatever. And I'm like, and then all of a sudden it's like, that didn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
People started going their own way. And part of it is just society. Well, next thing you know, because now all of a sudden, the cost of living is so great and our salaries haven't changed that now mom has to work too.
Yeah.
So then that changed everything. And, I think that is where part of the breakdown is. And it's just like,
the focus on family and doing things in a family unit is way less important in 2025 than I think it's ever been. And
there's
technology creeping in with all that just really.
That's the worst thing. And I mean, this is a conversation for another day, but I'm like, oh my God, like most people now, I mean, technology's great, but I'm like, oh, we're so handicapped. Yes. I mean, if somebody flipped the switch tomorrow and the lights got turned out, I know myself personally, I know a shitload of people. They're going to be freaking out within the first 4 hours.
Yes, agreed.
Within a day, holy crap! They're going to be saying that they're starving because they don't eat. Like I'm like, dude, really? I'm like, it is. It's a scary thought, but I mean, it's just it's. I mean. It's weird. It's like people just seem so. They're so guarded now. Like my father had this perfect, like way, and he was like when he was dead. He was like when I grew up. He was like if the neighbor's house burnt down, he was like your nan and papa. He goes, everybody in that neighborhood chipped in to help them. Whether he was like one house was had the kids sleep in there. The other, the next neighbor had the parents were staying there. He goes, dude. And he was like, you helped them rebuild because that's what a community did. He goes, now he was like, the neighbor's house is burning down. And the guy's like, honey, bring me another Jack and Coke. Check this out. Freaking neighbor's house is burning down.
Yeah.
And
they want to watch it.
I mean, where I grew up, and I don't know about you, but I mean, just here, I mean, like I can remember growing up that like all of a sudden it was like Saturday night. My mom would be like, "Well, we're going over to the neighbors tonight."
Yeah. Go
You
play
know,
cards.
yeah, well, or they're having a cookout,
Yep.
and there was five, six, seven of all the neighbors, the cool thing was is I mean, most of the time, like there was other kids I knew I was going to see there,
Yep.
but that's what you did. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, for real, for real, for real. Like when a new neighbor moved in, like my dad would walk across the street, introduce himself, and say, "Hey,
Yep.
if you need any." Holy shit! If you
Yep.
did that, like if a neighbor moved in now and I go walking across the street and I'd introduce myself, they'd think I was freaking stone cold certifiable crazy.
Yeah.
I mean,
That or some
literally,
places they pull a gun on you. So I'm not sure,
would
the
probably be like,
fear, the fear is real. The fear of people. It's
yeah,
sad. It's sad that we are as afraid of each other as we are. And we don't want to deal with anybody that is different than us. And it's strange. It's strange that we are so guarded the way we are. That's why I limit myself digitally with people, because one, you just never know. Two, I try to limit time off my phones, off my computers. I sit in front of a computer all day long at my other job. So when I can have time and put that down, I crochet a lot, because if
cool.
I'm crocheting, like I can see the time that I'm spending in the things that I'm making. And that
Well,
helps
yeah,
soothe. Hmm.
it's a lot easier when whatever it is that you do, you
Hmm.
see the fruits of it. Um,
Correct.
that it produces something.
Yes.
Um, it's like I mean, I would tell any if you're doing something and it's not producing jack shit, you may want to rethink things.
Yes, I
Because
agree.
if you're doing doesn't matter what it is, if you're involving effort into it, it should be for a reason. You know, there
Right.
should be some reward at the end. I mean, but I'm just like
Right.
it's. I mean, and I see the amount of time that's like people waste on like the most stupidest shit that I can imagine. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, are you serious? And
Yeah.
well, and it's just, I think people, it's like they've lost what that moral, I don't know. It's like the moral sense that I grew up with. I mean, like when I was a kid, I mean, I'm not shitting you. Like if I walked into McDonald's with my grandmother and I didn't hold the door for the guy that was coming in behind me, oh shit.
Hmm.
It was going to turn out to be an ugly lunch at McDonald's because I probably would have been marched over to his table and made to apologize. Um, or I've also seen the therapy of, well, the next thing you know, you're being made to stand there and hold the door open for the next five people to come up. Um,
Yeah.
I still like to this day, like I do that. Like somebody's coming, I'll stand there. I don't care if I've got to wait 30 seconds. I'm holding the door for you. If I see you coming and I know I'm holding the door for you. Man, it don't matter if you're a man, woman, child, or whatever. That's just how I was raised.
Yeah. Me too.
Um,
Me too.
but I mean, shit, that's not the case now. I mean, my one of my closest brothers said, I mean, great guy. We went to high school, junior high together. Man, we got in some serious, serious trouble together. But I mean, really good guy. And I mean, it's funny, like his wife and I mean, his wife's one of my best friends. And so she comes up with all these like great little pseudonyms, like for her husband's different attitudes. And like I'd walk in and she'd be like, she was like tie wearing Hans, like a suit and tie. She was like, tie wearing Hans is home right now. And I'm like, oh shit. And, like he's on the phone, like talking to somebody, and like I'm like, are you kidding me? And then like he hangs up the phone and walks around the corner. He's like, dude, what's up, bro? And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, why don't you just be that guy on the phone? Because I mean, you can still be the responsible because he was a vice president in one of the divisions of a bank here. I'm like, you can still be that guy. But
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, you should be this guy doing that because I'm like, oh, dude, I'd be more than willing to let you manage, put my money in your bank.
Right.
I'm like, for real, dude. And I
Mhm.
mean, that's what I told my buddy. He's like, you still haven't grown up. I said, hell no, absolutely. Well, I said, I have. I mean, I said, I understand what needs to be done, and try to be as mature and responsible to take care of my bills and everything else, and I save some money. And I'm like, I'm
Mhm.
still, but I said, where does that say I still can't be the crazy son of a gun that I am?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you know, I'm it's, and I mean, most of my friends are that way. But some of them, like I said, they all come over and they're sitting there and like, we'll like, dude, we should go do this. And they're like, oh my God, we can't. I'm like, what do you mean we can't do this? I
We
mean, like,
can do it.
I'm like, dude, I'm like, are you kidding me? You used to be the ringleader when we were in school. And now they're like, oh my God, we can't do that. What if we got in trouble?
Uh-huh.
I'm like, oh my God.
Yep. I
It's,
totally
oh,
understand.
this more than enough times. Dude, are you kidding me? Caught, my wife will kill me.
I
And
know it's weird, isn't it? I think it's weird.
a lot of the people I know, I'm like, dude, I know your wife too. I'm
Mhm.
like, are you kidding me? She used to be just as bad as you were in high school.
Mhm.
I was like, it's like she was the female ringleader of all the delinquents. And I'm like,
Yes.
and you're gonna get. I'm like, oh my God, what happened to you two? I'm like, you like so much fun, and I'm like, now you're square.
Mhm. Yep.
I'm like, you're a nerd now. I'm like, really? They're like, shut up. I'm like, it is. I'm like, oh my God.
So what do you
You
do
know.
what do you do for a career, Maddie? What do you do?
So I
How
am
do
a
you
super.
yeah, we'll say it. How do you pay your bills?
Okay, yeah, because it's funny because people. Well, this is what I tell people. I'm like, it's what I do for a living. It's you. What I do for a wage is basically I'm a superintendent for a construction company.
Oh, superintendent, what does that mean?
So I basically am in charge of running jobs for our company.
Oh.
And I've been doing this a really long time. And the guy that I work for, great guy.
Yeah.
And so we went to, I mean, we went to elementary school together. I mean, I've known the guy, and like, I forget, a couple weeks ago, my neighbor's like, dude, he was like, he was like, you and David have known each other like 44 years. And I'm like, oh my God.
Wow.
I'm like,
Wow.
I'm like, man, we met in first grade. But when I was at my lowest, coming out of basically, I had come home from rehab the first time, and things just were bad.
Yeah.
You know, there very rarely does your first shot in a rehab snap it into reality of like, hey, and basically it's like my buddy. This is what he was like, dude. He's like, you just decide to stick your head back up your own ass. Um, and he looked at me. He was like, dude, really nasty place. He was like, you'd think after a while you would certainly want your head stuck somewhere else. But he was like, nope. He was like, you're like an ostrich. He was like, but you just decide to stick your head in your ass. And I mean, he would say that to me all the time. Like, he'd stop up and he'd be like, did you have your ass like, I'm like, yeah. And he's like, how was it? And I'm just like, it's like, shut up. Um, and but anyways, I was a mess. And so, his father had been giving me some counseling. He was basically like a Christian counselor. And so he basically said to, told his son, hey, and so he was just a small company, and he got this huge painting job, and basically he offered me to come to work for him. And
Oh,
I
nice.
mean, it was crazy. I said to him the other day, I'm like, you realize I started with you for like $9 an hour. Um, and I was just like, oh my God, we look back on it, and but it's what I thrive on. Is like, I like to work with my hands. Like,
Yeah.
I really need to see the fruits of my labor. And I mean, to each their own. I mean, The world's not going to go around. I mean, you got to have guys that are happy sitting behind a computer desk, and there's not a damn thing wrong with that.
Right.
You know, for anybody, if that's what you know, I would certainly say this is a serious problem. Most people in this world are not happy at their jobs, which that pretty much you're screwed at that point if you don't figure out how to deal with that issue.
Yes,
You
I
know,
agree.
and
I agree.
you know,
Yep.
you really, I don't care if you don't see it. You need to find something that truly makes you happy, because when you're happy and you're passionate about something, I mean, you know this. You sense energy probably more than I do. I
Yeah.
mean, when you know you do something that makes you happy, I mean, the aura about a person, energy, I mean, everything changes, and that energy affects everything else in your life.
Right. And it affects the people
Um,
around you.
oh my God, yes. I mean,
Mhm.
people don't, I mean, you don't, people don't understand. Like I could walk in a room and I could totally influence how somebody feels, and I don't even have to
Mhm.
open my mouth. It can just be
Right.
by my body language and
Yep. The
just the
energy.
energy
Yep. The
that
energy you
I am
emanate.
giving.
Yep.
Oh my
Yes.
God, yeah. I mean,
You just
like
you just explained what my profile name is. Happy KB. Happy is an affirmation. That's how I always want to be, and that's how I always like to feel. And I normally am happy. I'm not very unhappy very often. And it's partly because of that exact thing. That's the energy I want to emit from myself, and I want that to be infectious for anybody else that comes around me, because I don't ever want to be the negative. I don't ever want to put out that negative, because that doesn't make me feel good. Being happy, being nice, being polite, being considerate, those things those give me so much energy and positive energy. Like I want to be infectious to everybody else, and they take that and they spread that out. So yeah, I totally
absolutely. I
understand
mean,
that. Hmm.
if people were just, I mean, just compassionate and just happy and open with you, I mean, oh my God, I mean, people don't understand. I mean, we would be like we're a force to be reckoned with. I mean,
Yes.
certainly, you know, I don't think we wouldn't be in this position as a society. Um, you know, I mean, like you look at our government. I'm like, dude, they're supposed to work for us. You know, there was a point where we were like, no, this ain't happening. It didn't happen. I'm
Right.
like, you, this is not how this is all supposed to work. You know, I mean, like before taxes, I mean, so, before our almighty income tax, which is, that's a tough topic for another thing. But I, I mean, honestly, if you crunch the numbers, and I crunch numbers on things because math doesn't lie. I mean,
Right.
it's as simple as this. You can look at me and tell me 900 different ways. I'm like, doesn't matter, bro. Right here on the paper that you're full of shit.
Yes.
It just don't add up. It just don't add up. But before income taxes, things were paid. They're like, well, you have to have that to pay for roads. I'm like, to do this, to do that. I'm like, well, in the day they used to sell bonds. If the government wanted to do something, they sold bonds. And if we, the people, were into what they wanted to do, we would buy those bonds.
Right.
But if we're like, no, that's crazy. We just didn't buy the bonds. Well, they didn't get to do what they wanted to do.
Right. Yes.
So, so here comes our income tax, and now they just do whatever they want to do. But I'm like, no, you work for, I mean, they're supposed to work for us and say, hey, what do you
Supposed to.
guys want?
Supposed to. But down the line somewhere, those people in charge kind of started twisting how some things were supposed to be ran, and
I
henceforth.
mean, it's going to happen. I mean, and I
Right.
mean,
We
I
don't
don't, I don't,
we don't know the best way to handle things at times, and so we have
well,
to
no.
we
And I
have
mean,
to.
as a people don't understand it. So you have a young politician that's, his voice, it carries some weight in decisions that are made,
Mhm.
and we don't know, so it's like, dude, I've never been in that position. So, but I mean, it's as simple as, I mean, this happens. I mean, all of a sudden there's say some huge industry leader that wants something to happen. And well, all of a sudden, your kid's tuition is getting paid, or,
Yep.
to go to I mean, it's hard because, I mean, I mean, the weight that they carry. There's no lie in this. I mean, that's how they're all as wealthy as they are. I mean, they make
Yeah.
decisions on the floor that affect industry.
Right.
And they know that, okay, the decision, this bill that's going to get passed is going to cause this industry to basically just have the bottom drop out of it. Well, okay, well, now it doesn't take a brainiac to figure out where you're going to invest your money or do whatever.
Right.
And I'm like, anywhere else in the world that's called insider trading, I'm like, you crucified Martha Stewart for it, for God's
Oh,
sakes.
yeah. She served time for that.
I know. And I'm like, and what she did was peanuts.
Right.
I mean, like, if you look, I'm not going to name her, but one of our female Congress people.
Yes.
I mean, so she's worth like $129 million. Well, crunch the numbers on that. At her salary, that means if she would have to save her salary to do that, she'd have to have been in office 3,049 years.
I mean, she kind of looks like she's been there that long, but it's fine.
I'm like, bro, and you're going to look me in, and this is what I said to you before. I'm like, I'm not a conspiracy nut. What I am is when you look me in the face and tell me that, I mean, there's 100 things in front of me that I'm like, yeah, this is some screwed up shit. And they're all like, well, it seems that way, but they're all just coincidences. Are you serious? I'm like, do I have jackass written on my forehead?
Yes, that's what they want us to know, that we do have that written on our faces.
But I'll be like somewhere and I look at the guy next to me and I'm like, holy shit, you do have jackass written on your forehead. I'm like, you're buying this? I'm like, oh my God.
So let me ask, since we've gotten into this subject, so what do you think about this tariff situation? How do you feel about the tariffs?
You want my honest opinion? I think,
I want your honest opinion.
You know what? Simple as this, yeah. Okay. You want to sell your product in this country, and it's causing people in this country not to have jobs and, hurt the business that they're in. It takes, basically takes jobs away from America. Yeah. Guess what? Well, you're going to pay heavily to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the whole the whole free trade agreement. I mean, that was like the beginning of the end. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I mean, like people, like the income tax, everything. I'm like, do you not see this? I mean, basically, right? I mean, the income tax that we pay now. I mean, it's as simple as this: we are paying the interest on money that people spent doing things that they never asked us if it was okay for.
Correct.
We're now paying I'm like, wait, what? I mean, that's like, it's as simple as that would be like all of a sudden my neighbor walking over and be like, yo, man, I bought a new car today. Guess what? You're picking up the tab.
Yep.
I mean,
yes,
it's no different. I'm like, I'm like, I'm not going to say, I mean, one thing I've learned is if you want to maintain a close relationship with people, unless you're really close, you probably really shouldn't talk theology and you probably shouldn't talk politics.
Politics. That's right.
I mean, I've been in rooms where I've seen two best friends. All of a sudden, they're beating the shit out of each other on, did they wear a red sweater or a blue sweater when they vote? I mean, I've seen that crap sever friendships.
Yeah,
I mean, I've seen
it's scary.
People's personal beliefs shatter freaking relationships, and I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me?
Yeah.
I mean, and It's as simple as this. I'm just going to put this out there. So, I have a friend. He's a guy. I'm not, no name. I mean, but he's gay. So what?
Yeah.
But there's still, unfortunately, there is. I mean, there's a prejudice and a stereotype about homosexuals.
Yeah.
I mean, just about everything. There's a stereotype about blacks and Hispanics, but there's same stereotype about us, Caucasian and white people. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, okay, you want to talk about a waste of time? And like I
Yes.
told, and like I mean, like I know guys, and they're like, really? Like you would count on him? They're like, he's gay. I'm like, yeah, who gives a shit? I'm like, I'm like, dude, it's simple as this. I'm like, 4 o'clock in the morning, I need it. I call. I'm like, dude, he's walking out the door pulling his underwear on to get to his
Right.
car to get here. And I'm like, and I'm telling the other guy, I'm like, you certainly, you wouldn't even be answering your damn phone.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't care how he voted. What I count on, what I care about is if I need him as a friend and I call him and say, bro, I need you, dude, he's there. I don't give a crap about it. That's what's important.
Yes, because he's a human being.
Well, and I mean,
When we dehumanize people because of the things that they are into, their lifestyles, the color of their skin, the way that they worship, the way that they politically align, when we dehumanize people for those things, yeah, we have a problem, and it happens every day.
well, I'm like, dude, I mean, people have lost the idea of, I mean, what a relationship is. I mean, like example, like when I was growing up, I mean, like divorce was a heavy duty freaking thing. Like,
Yes.
now, I mean, people just get married and I mean, literally, I've heard this, like, yeah, I'm like, you sure about this? And they're like, oh, if it don't work out, you would
I'll
just
just
get
get
divorced.
divorced. Yeah.
I'm like, bro, then you know what? I'm like, that's what boyfriend, girlfriends do.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's how you find the person you're supposed to marry so that you get married. I'm like, hello? Like, do you know them vowels? I mean, they're supposed to mean something, thick and thin, for better or for worse. I'm like, hello?
Yeah.
I'm like, people just have lost their core values.
Right.
Like you just,
We don't value marriage. We don't what the sanctity of marriage is and the importance of it and how hard it is to be married. I don't know. I've never been married, but I come from a mom and dad that are still married and have had, they've really had to work at it. And like I've had
oh
really
my
good
God, yeah.
I have a good role models in my life that even my brother and his wife are still married, and like the things that they had to go through, they just didn't go, oh well, I'm done with you, I'm just gonna go divorce you. It's harder than that. It's I don't know. I never got that person to show up in my life that I wanted to commit and make it and like work on a marriage with, because I didn't want to jump into anything.
And guess what? There's nothing wrong with any of those things.
Yep.
I mean, I have personal friends that they've been together 20, 25, 30 years.
Mhm.
They didn't get married. They
Yep.
have families, great kids. They're just like,
Yep.
they're just like, they're like, dude, it's simple as this. There was one person for me and I found her. And
Mhm.
I don't need some piece of freaking paper to,
Well,
you know,
right. In
they're,
this day and age, it's all a piece of paper for a governmental purposes. So we can
oh
file our
yeah. I mean,
taxes
they're,
and it can all be go. And that's where we've lost what being married to somebody actually is because we turned it into this other thing. This thing so
oh
we can
yeah.
have insurance, this thing so we can file taxes, this thing that so we can get benefits from our spouse. And yeah,
Oh
it's
yeah.
just it's we don't value the meeting somebody, being with somebody, staying with somebody, and actually building a life with somebody because now we
Well, I
want
mean,
everything under the sun. We
oh
don't
yeah.
want just
Well, and so that's where I was going. And I sometimes when I'm talking, I enjoy talking with people. Like I'll forget where I was, but we're talking about that. And so, this sense of entitlement. One of my close friends, he said to me, he's like, Manny, I just don't know where the hell I went wrong. And I'm like, he's like, and he was talking about his son. I'm like, brother, you didn't go wrong. I'm like, in my opinion, and I said, this is just not because I'm your friend. I'm like, you're an awesome person. I mean, I'm like, dude, you've got great morals. I mean, I've seen you instill this into your kid. I'm like, dude, it's the 8 hours a day that they're in school that you aren't there in their life.
Yeah.
It's the other families that they hang out with, after school. I'm like, dude. And he was like, so literally I'm like, so he's telling me, he's like, dude, he was like, my kid literally tells me the other week, he's like, it started out like he got in trouble in school, and he was just literally like, could not fathom why he was being punished. And he did it with me, but yet his parent and my buddy's like, well, then pack your freaking bags and go move in with them, because he's like, that's not the way it happens. So, he's like, it doesn't happen that way here. And then he's like, oh, it gets better. He's like, he tells us now that basically he should get whatever he wants. And how did you come up with that, young Einstein? And he's like, well, it's as simple as this. He goes, I've got to live in this world, and it's by no choice of my own. He was like, you and mom didn't take into consideration my feelings or how I was, and literally my buddy looked at me and he goes, dude, I tell you, he's like, listen, bro. He's like, he's like, when we were busy making you, he's like, we weren't really thinking about a bunch of shit. He was like, we were both thinking, and I'm like, oh, touche, dude, you gave it to him good. He goes, yeah. He's like, he was like, I was just thinking about banging your mom. Trust me, wasn't worrying about you. He's like, she got pregnant. But, he was like, I said, how did you react to that? He goes, I wanted to take him out in the yard and choke him till his eyes started to bulge. And he goes, and then let him breathe and be like, are you okay? And he's like, kiss him on the forehead, tell him I love him, and then choke him some more. And I'm like, damn, bro. And he's like, but here's the clincher. He goes, no. He was like, he was like his mother. He was like, dude, my buddy's wife. He was like, my wife wanted to kill him. He was like, he was like, she was so pissed off. And I'm like, that's the world we live in. No, man, it's as simple as this. You're going to get what you earn and what you work for.
Yeah.
And that's part of this. I mean, and part of it, I think, the government wants people like in the inner cities. I don't care if you're black, Hispanic, white, whatever. None of that makes any. They want you on government programs. I mean, they want you relying on them because if all of a sudden public opinion changes and people start realizing that we're getting screwed and they want to start getting a little uppity, they're like, well, guess what? No more, no more food stamps. No more, no more, your bills, your gas and your utilities are paid. None of that. It keeps the people real calm.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at it and this is just a proven fact. Look at the numbers. I mean, I don't care what race you are. If you're a really young girl and you see all your sisters and all your cousins and your aunts and all of them just getting pregnant all the time and having basically children out of wedlock, that if you stay single as a woman, the government will basically step in and pay all your bills, give you food stamps for your kids, and you don't have to do a damn thing. You can sit around all day long, and chances are
it's true.
She's gonna do the same thing. Because it's just the environment they're in. Same difference. I mean, you're a young guy and you see all the older males, out on the corner slinging dope.
Yep.
And they're making $3-4 grand a day. And dude, they're like, what? You want me to work for 40 hours a week and pay me $250 or $300? Or they're going to do the same damn thing.
Yeah.
And nothing is done to try to change the cycle in any of that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there isn't.
I truly believe in my heart that all the racial tension that has been felt through this country, I mean, for decades, there's somebody behind the scenes there, I look at it now and I'm just like, bro, do you not see this? It's like there's somebody constantly fueling the fire.
Yes.
Um, and I'm like, it doesn't matter whether it's, attention against transgender people or gay or people of a different race or skin. I'm like, bro, this is a lot of hate. And it's like, it seems to me like somebody's keeping us so busy and so occupied with all this stuff that we don't see. It's like the Wizard of Oz. Don't look at the guy. Don't look at the man behind
Yes.
the curtain.
Behind the curtain. Yes. Absolutely. Yes.
I'm like, bro. By the time, and here's the sad thing: by the time we realize it, that it's going to be too late. And I'm like, dude, people, we need to start waking up now.
Well, here's my question. Do you feel that there are more people becoming awake than where they were before? Do you get that sensation? Do you feel that yet?
Oh yeah, and you and I talked about this. So,
Mhm.
yeah. I mean, if you want, I do, and I have views on that. And I mean, if you had said to me that, conversation doesn't usually go this direction, just which is weird, but that's just how conversations are. But absolutely, there's something that's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, and I find it fascinating, because it's becoming more acceptable. Let's say, so okay, they're realizing now that psilocybin therapy is
Yes.
is one of the only thing that works for these horribly battered people that come back from like Iraq and Afghanistan that have PTSD so bad they can't even leave their house to go get groceries.
Yes.
They hear a kid pop a bubble wrap and they about shit their pants because it's that knee jerk reaction. I'm like, bro, and nothing that big pharmacy is making for them is doing a
Is
fucking thing.
working. Yeah. Well,
But
just
I'm
how
like,
hard we've had to fight to get MDMA certified so they can start using that in the PTSD for our vets alone. Like we've had to fight tooth and nail just to get this substance that we in the psychedelic world know can help. We in the psychedelic know that these substances and these medicines do help.
well, and so you see it. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I look at things in such a simple way. I'm like, okay, so you have, let's say you have MDMA. Okay, it's a Schedule One narcotic, so that means that it has absolutely no redeeming qualities of that are produced by it whatsoever. So that
Mhm.
also means that it's illegal to use it to do research with or
Right.
anything like. And I'm like, bro, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. Okay, so you got 100,000 freaking people with PTSD that's war generated
Yeah.
and nothing you assholes are doing is working. But yet
Yeah.
you give all these guys a good dose of freaking Molly, basically under controlled environment. And
Mhm.
dude, they can go back to work. They're able to go to the store. They're able to be a father or a mother.
Exactly.
Hello? It, and yet you're going to tell me there's no redeeming qualities to it. Okay,
Mhm.
well, I guess my idea and of that definition and yours are two totally different things.
Yes.
Um, I mean, I'm a big cannabis advocate. I mean, you look at that, okay? So it's the only drug that basically we have receptors in our brain that are specifically geared to respond with cannabinoids. I mean, our body produces our own endocannabinoids. I mean,
Right.
that's what a runner's high is.
Yep.
I'm like, and I'm like, here's the thing. I'm like, it syncs with your brain.
Mhm.
All your other drugs that are out there, like your crazy ones, they don't do that. Heroin, cocaine, meth, they basically rewrite your brain's programming. That to a point where when for it can be hard for like, and I've been an opiate addict. I mean, your brain gets to a point where how it is that's what it associates normal is. So
Yeah.
when you don't have that substance there, dude, well, that ain't cool. It's basically rewriting your programming. I'm like, but cannabis doesn't do that. And I'm like, really? I mean, it's and I, like my boss was like, so his son his oldest son, he literally was like, dude, you got to talk to him about stopping smoking weed. I'm like, excuse me? Because he totally knows. I mean, he knows I smoke weed.
Right.
And I'm like, you're asking me? And he's like, he was like, he respects you. I'm like, dude, I do bong hits when I go home. I'm like, and he's like, I'm like, bro, you got to learn. He's not going to do anything. You can't force anything on him.
Yeah.
And here's the deal. I said, and the harder you try, let me tell you what, probably the more pot he's going to smoke.
Yep.
Because that's the reaction. I'm like, bro. And of course he was like, I know, but he was like, for God's sakes, it's the gateway drug. And I'm like, oh my God, you're like, you're like some 1958 Reefer's Madness movie. I'm like, you serious? I'm like, bro, that is such a lie. I tell him, I'm like, myself and like numerous friends I have that I grew up with in like I'm like, every one of us, if you ask them the same question, they would rather see their kids smoke weed than like be out drinking.
Yeah.
And they're like,
100%.
I said to him, I'm like, bro, I hate to tell you this. I said, every horribly bad decision I have ever made, I can almost guarantee you there was alcohol at the center of that son of a bitch. Oh, there was, dude. I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like, but the problem with it is it's socially acceptable.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's like my dad said. I mean, you could be the CEO of $1 billion company and you go out and get shit faced every day at lunch and go back to your office. As long as that company's still making billions of dollars, just they don't give a shit.
They don't care. Yep. That's right.
And, you know, it's just how it is. You know, it's everywhere you go. I mean, it's you know, and that's like for me, that was part of what I seen that guy becoming awake, and I'm like looking at things, and I'm like, well, wait, you know, I'm like, where does it say that I'm in? I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not going to. Okay, you're not going to say that. And I'm like, you know, this is so much of this is ingrained into our culture. I'm like, I still have friends that literally live this lifestyle. They, you know, all week long they work to get to Friday, and then they go out with their wife or husband to the bar, get completely fucking shit faced, and then come home. And I'm like, and then you lay there all day Saturday, like just moaning and whining like we did when we were in our 20s.
Yes, but it's twice as hard and twice as
I'm like,
rough.
really, dude? But then it's also, you know, well, this is how it is. Well, you know, our society, dude. Hey, man, I get these calls still, dude. It was, you know, this and that. It was, dude, it was an incredible day. Come on, we're going out drinking tonight. I'm like, okay, well, where does it say that because it was an incredible day that you got to go drinking? You know, like I'm at a point like, and so people are like, you can't drink. You're an alcoholic. I'm like, no. I'm like, I finally figured this shit out. I'm like, dude. I'm like, I have a drink when I want to have a drink. And I said, it's not that often anymore. You know, Friday, Saturday nights, you know, I might have a few, and I especially enjoy having a few drinks, like when I'm in my kitchen and I cook. I love to cook. You know,
yes,
especially
I know.
like, you know,
I've seen something you've cooked and it looked delicious. So yes, I'm aware you like to cook.
Like, especially like if I'm making something that has wine in it, like I'll buy a bottle and I'm like, so, you know, it gets one glass or a cup of wine in it. Well, yeah, guess what? It's not going to waste. I'm going to drink the rest of that bottle of, you know, Chardonnay or whatever. But you know what? There's nothing wrong with that because, you know, I tell anybody, I'm like, dude, you can do whatever the hell you want. I'm like, dude, I don't care. You can smoke crack all night long. As long as you take care of your business first, though.
Yeah.
All your bills are met. All your responsibilities are taken care of. If that's all done and you can do this and still repeatedly take care of your responsibilities, well, then that's on you. You know, but the minute it's anything you do, the minute it starts making your responsibilities get crazy, you should probably take a good look at it.
Yeah. I agree.
And I'm like, so now it's like I've had many a bad day. And I didn't have a beer. I've had bad days where I did have a beer. You know, I've had good days where I didn't just decide to drink, and then there's been days where it's just because didn't have any bearing on whether it was a good or bad day. I just wanted to have a beer.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, it's just, I lost sight of things. It's it's fine to relax, or I find, oh man, I found great healing and just, simple as this, like, every once in a while, just basically dropping off the grid for a Friday night and dropping 2 hits of freaking acid. And
Yeah.
man, just go on a soul searching. I'm like, oh my God. 10 hours of the most incredible freaking soul searching that you've ever done. Like, I've sat in a room with no music or anything, just in my own thoughts,
Yes.
and like looking at shit. And it's like you can just kind of sit these things down in front of you and like look at the whole big picture. And
Mm-hmm.
you're like, oh shit. Yep. I don't like that. I don't like this.
Yep.
It's, I can tell you, I find I become way recentered again. I feel just more balanced.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
and I look at that and I'm like, it's like sometimes my buddy said this, he goes, you ever wonder why he was like, technically he was like the couple the psychedelics that basically open your third eye. He's like, you ever wonder why they're the ones that carry the harshest penalties out of all the drugs and the longest prison sentences? And
Yeah.
he was like, kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? And I kind of wonder, like, is there the powers that be that are out there? No, because you and I've talked about this. Like, it's weird. Like, mushrooms are one thing, so is acid, but like DMT is a whole different creature. Um,
Yes.
it's alive. It senses. Like, it's no lie. I make my own carts.
Yeah.
Um, and
And
not to
thus,
toot my
and
own,
thus,
not to
and
toot,
thus, you should, if you are partaking, because well, it's a better experience if you've done the whole process instead of
it's,
getting it
oh,
from
you get it.
somebody you don't know who made that,
Well,
because then
it,
therefore
it
you don't
is. And
know
there's part of it is the self gratification, though, is it's something that you created.
exactly.
Um, that's part of it. Same thing with mushrooms. When you grow your own, you're going on a journey with something like it. You're being able to, you have the keys to unlock a
Mhm.
dimensional wall, and it's because you're the one that created it.
You
Um,
created, you created the doorway. You
it
took
is.
enough time to put that effort in it, and you created that out of, and the energy that's put into it, and the whole mental process. One of my favorite things is talk to cultivators and like the things that they become so passionate about the mushroom and growing the mushrooms, and they actually, a lot of them talk about the connection, the mushrooms finding them and connecting with them. DMT is the same way. I've found that people who have gravitated to DMT, that are looking to learn how to extract it themselves, become very passionate about it, because it's the begin, like the journey itself, not even the actual experience of smoking the DMT and have the blasting session, just that taking a plant, taking its bark, breaking it down, the whole alchemical process of it, and then the understanding of the energy process that we as humans put into everything that we do. And then we have this created product, this substance that we went and did this whole alchemical process to change a plant into a stone or a molecule, a crystal molecule. That in
Yeah.
itself is magic. That's crazy. Like, I remember the first time, I had crappy bark. But I was going to do it, and I did it. And it took me forever. And when I had the product, it was so amazing, because it was like, I did this myself. And I
Oh
knew,
yeah.
this molecule is going to take me to places that are going to be uh,
Well,
beyond
like,
my whole thought process. Yeah, and it's exciting. You tell
like
me.
for me growing up, like, when I was in my teens and even in my 20s and stuff, like, like there was always mushrooms, always acid. Every once in a while, if you're really lucky, you found like real true some mescaline. Um,
Mescaline, yeah.
but
Mm.
DMT, like, you would hear the whispers of it.
Yeah, it
Um,
was never,
it-
yeah. It was
it's
never
like,
prevalent.
No, it was like the pink unicorn that farted rainbows. I mean, it's so mythical, but you ain't ever. It's just like you would hear stories of it, or, I mean, for God's sakes, I can remember. Do you remember High Times magazine? And
Yes.
there would be little articles in there about it, and you're just like, oh my God, what is this? And
Yes.
and it's like I said, it's weird. Like, not to toot my own horn, but my carts are pretty thumping, and so um, but I wanted them that way. But it's like I've come home and like and I didn't realize it at the time, but I look back on it now and I'm like, oh my God, like I didn't see it. Like it's like I've come home and like I've done 2, 3, 4 hits, and like you would think, but it's nothing really happens that's astounding. And then there's been times I come home and like I would just do one, and all of a sudden, like my whole dining room like turns into this multicolored freaking rainbow box.
Yep.
And like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm watching shit pulsing through, like, especially my cat. I mean, I looked at my cat the one time. He's my mom's cat, and like there was like kaleidoscopic swirls shooting through his fur. And when he looked up at me, his eyes were changing color. And when I mean color, they were like pink and blue. And I was like, holy shit. But I'm like,
Yes.
okay, but I'm like, why does that not happen when I've done 3 or 4 blinkers?
Mhm.
But now I just do one. And I look back, it was the emotional state that I was in before
Ooh,
I did
yes,
it.
absolutely.
Um, and I've said this to you, fear and anger seem to be somehow a big no-no in the world of DMT.
Correct.
Um, like, I mean, I've talked to many people when they are in their, I mean, full breakthrough, and they're like, the minute that they start, they're like, dude, they got scared, and they were like, it was right over.
Mhm. Yep.
It's like, okay, do not pass go. And boom, yeah, we're like, that's it. It's like, um, and you and I talked about this, and this is what I'm like, bro, um, all of us, I think, in a sense of, we've all just only been scratching the surface. Like none of us have really truly broken through, any of us, because, I, in my impression, that all,
Mhm.
all, all the, all the entities that I've ever encountered I get the sense, because I'm very empathic, and they're testing us. It's a test. It's like, and I mean, like I've said this to you before, like I've read so many things on the basic 3 entities,
Mhm.
the little elf-like ones, your geomechanical ones, and then the ones that are alien-like, and they
Right.
always impart some sort of life-changing wisdom. I'm like, okay, I haven't really seen any of them 3 yet. But I've talked to people. I mean, there's just a plethora of them, and
Yeah.
but they all get the same sense. They're like, it is. It's like you're being tested. It's like they're keepers of the gate.
Mhm.
And I'm like, dude, that's not breaking through. The breakthrough is when we finally get left to go through that gate, and you get to see what's on the other side. I'm
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
I don't. It's like, I get that impression. I mean, I feel like they are definitely guardians. I mean, like, and there was people on the world they were like, dude, my encounters here recently, they've been like negative. And my response to them was like, dude, they'll answer you. Did you think about just asking them? Well, hey, why are you pissed? I'm like, they'll answer you, bro, in one way or another. And I'm like, like I look at it this way. I'm like, I think we as a whole, I'm like, when you look at shamans and stuff, and you look at Native American culture and stuff, before they go on a massive peyote journey or ayahuasca, any of that, dude, they
Mhm.
spent like a couple days like purifying and cleansing themselves. Like,
Yes.
let me tell you, I mean, hot pay, oh yeah, it'll cleanse you. I mean, you'll you'll have projectile vomiting and diarrhea, and you have
Yeah.
snot running out your nose.
The
And I'm
purge
like,
is real. Yes.
and I, and not just that, they fast.
Yeah.
They'll fast. I said, they'll sit for hours and meditate. I'm like, bro, you got to look at what's going on here. We're missing the big picture here, bro.
Right.
This is
Right.
something you need to truly prepare for.
Yes.
I'm like, and I'm like, I think some of the, like, I'm like, they've been on the other side of the gate. Cause here's the deal. I'm like, nobody that I've talked to, like, is getting like some crazy mind altering advice from the entities that they've met.
Right.
They're like, but I mean, shaman, they go on these journeys because there's a problem, and there's answers that need to be given,
Right.
or or they're asking for a direction to be pointed. I'm like, okay, well, if it's not, they're going on these journeys. And then once again, I just look at things logically. I'm like, man, I've had some crazy encounters with entities. But none of them are like, yo, bro, you should go that way.
Right.
I'm like, that's coming from the thing on the other side of the gate that they seem to be protecting.
Right.
I
Well,
mean,
and here's the thing. I really firmly believe that so when the things become nichey, when people are like, "Oh, I got a cart. Oh, I'm going to get a cart," and we start commercializing it, and we start putting it out there for profit, and we start putting it out there, and it becomes the drug of fun. Oh, I'm going to take this, and I want to go do this at a festival, and I want to go take this, and I want to go do this at a party, or I want to go take this, then we're losing the actual understanding of what this molecule is actually purposed for.
exactly. And I mean, there's just too many people that are just like, oh, when I get done work at 3:30, I'm going to go home and break through tonight.
Yes.
Like, dude, that's not how it works. Like, you're supposed
Mhm.
to really be like, it's just like, it's like it's as common now as like coming home and doing a bong hit.
Yes.
It's just, I'm like, dude, that's not how this works.
Right.
There's something crazy over there, and it's just not something to be joked with.
Right.
You know,
To go and
um,
commune, to go and commune with the spirit is a serious thing. It's a serious matter. That's why at this point in time, the only time that I really smoke DMT is when I'm being summoned, because in the beginning, we when we all first start smoking it, we want to smoke it and we want to get there and we want to keep getting there and and then we
oh
get
yeah,
shut
I
out.
mean,
The whole shutout factor. And that's what really drives people crazy, because they're just like, what did I do? What did I do wrong? How come I can't go back? How come I can't have the same experience? Well,
uh-huh.
when that happened to me, when the shutout and things just weren't the same and things, that's when I knew that I had been there too much. It was time for me to stop and to integrate and figure out what I had seen and what I had been experiencing. And then I needed to wait until it summoned me back. And there's been several times it does. I know when it's happening because I can smell DMT. I can be in the middle of a grocery store, or I can be at work or somewhere, and all of a sudden I can smell DMT. And I'm just
Oh
like,
yeah.
oh, that's my sign. I need to get prepared. I need to get my wherever I'm going to do this at, get it up and get it right where I need to be so I can get suited up and go back in, because there's something out there that I'm supposed to be going to go see. But yeah, it is. I don't think people understand what the seriousness of doing DMT is, and
No,
I
and I
think
mean,
that's
like,
also.
I
Mhm.
knew right away. Like, I had never, and unfortunately, my first one was bought, off basically off the black market, and and I mean, here's the crazy thing. I mean, so I got this thing, and of course, um, so I have like informed delivery, so I get a package, and like I already know that there's a package coming, and as soon
Right,
as it gets
right, yeah.
delivered, I get a notification. So I'm like, I'm at work, and I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, I'm like, damn, I can get home. And so I rush home, and I come home, and so, I sit in my living room, and I took some lunch in with me, and I took it out, screwed it onto one of my batteries, and man, I took one hit, and I was like, holy shit, I got to go back to work in 30 minutes. I'm like, wow. Um, but it wasn't when I mean, like when the first time, I mean, I'll never forget. So I was sitting in my dining room, and there's a big glass table in there, and that's like where I'll do like paperwork from work, anything, and
Yeah.
like I usually was sitting there, and I mean everything changed. I looked down, and like it was just the craziest. The carpet was, I mean, the most brightest, like psychedelic colors. The walls, everything. I was like, oh my God. And I mean, I've seen some crazy shit on acid and on mushrooms. I was like, my buddy's like, how bad? I said, dude, I ain't never seen shit like that before. I was like, oh my God. And like, he didn't understand.
Yeah.
And so, so he's one of my closest brothers. I mean, so, he kind of was with me when my whole mad scientist thing started. See, I'm the kind of person like, if you're like, oh, bro, you he can do it, but yeah, you ain't gonna be able to do that, man. That's all
Mm.
you got to tell me. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
watch
I
this. I'm
resemble
like,
I
watch this.
resemble those types of things too. You know,
Oh,
don't tell me I can't do something or I'm gonna prove you wrong.
so I mean, that's
I can
basically
do
what it
whatever.
was. We were a friend of mine. We were talking about it, and I'm like, dude, I ought to just tech. It was like, dude, we want to get the DM. I'm like, I ought to just fucking tech it for us. And he's like, are you kidding me? He's like, dude, he was like, you pretty much do anything you've ever set your mind to.
Mhm.
He
Yep.
goes, I think this is a little bit above your pay grade though. And I'm
Mhm.
like, I was literally like, oh yeah, motherfucker. I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, watch this. So I literally spent like 8, 9 months reading everything that I could on it.
Right.
Um, and then when I got my first thing of bark, oh, my buddy's here with me. I mean, it was crazy. It's like 5 crock pots going in my freaking garage. I mean,
Mhm.
it's like we were up all night. There's steam. I mean, in the room.
Yep.
I mean, it's crazy.
It was
And it's like,
exciting, wasn't it? It was super exciting.
like so. He finally goes to go. Hey, he was like, I gotta run home and do a couple things. I'll be back. And I'm like, okay. And so we get to the point. I'm like, oh, I have my first pull. And I've got it in. Well, I didn't know anything about the whole you just the freeze propagation of it. So I'm there, I'm just
Oh,
evaporating. I got like 4 fans on this pan, and I'm like, oh my God. And literally I see a couple crystals starting. And I'm calling my buddy, I'm like, get your ass back up here. I'm like, oh my God. And literally it was like by the time it was done, there was like 3 crystals. And I mean I'm like, wait, I don't think this is the way this is supposed to work out. And so I just did a lot more reading, and all of a sudden I figured it out. And so literally, my buddy stops back up, and I'm like, check this out. And he's just like, holy shit. So, my original friend that, just had to light the fire, I'm like, hey, stop by. And he's like, Jesus Christ. He's like, you fucking did
Mhm.
it. I'm like, well, no shit, asshole. I'm like, what'd you think was going to happen? And I mean, I've had some crazy good returns. I mean, the tech that I use, and I mean, I've asked people across numerous platforms and encounters, and like, so especially when I first started with this new tech, and I'm like, so what's it good, comfortable, average? And I mean, you always hear like, okay, it's usually, you get a gram per 100.
Right.
And he said, if you're doing really good, maybe like 1.3, 1.4. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, why? What'd you do? I said, 2.4,
Oh,
you
nice.
know?
You pulled over 2%.
Yeah, and he's just like, "Wait, what?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I've repeatedly done that. Now I also know that here's the thing. I mean, I've read many articles where they're like, "Okay, we found that the quality of bark fluctuates from winter to summer." Um,
Right.
and they're like,
Depending on how far into the bark, what part
"Yep."
of the bark you actually have. Hmm.
Well, and trees, any tree or plant changes kind of how it does things when it gets cold. Um,
Correct.
so here's the thing. So, summertime here for us, most of the places where, it's, mimosa's going to grow, it's
Hmm.
wintertime,
Right.
I mean, so that's just, but, I've found consistency and, you know, um, it's just like, like it's the tech that I found, but it's like you saw. I mean, I've had some crazy shit happen, where I'm like, and I still don't fully understand what's, so I, talked to you, and I was reading the, Swim's whole thing, and he's like, oh my God, he's like you're missing it. He was like, there's always a little bit of 5-MeO in there, and then
Oh, yeah.
5-OH or whatever. And he was like, but you have to chemically pull them a different way. And so I'm like,
Right.
okay. I'm like, I'm going for this. And so I told you that. And I'm like, he was like, so, you're using a solution of basically citric acid. And he was like, you'll watch. He was like, if there's any 5-MeO, it'll fall out of solution. And I'm like, okay,
Right.
cool. And he was like, now, basically, if you get the gist of it's not going to be like some great thing. I mean, it's going to be a small amount, but if you do that
Right.
repeatedly, eventually you have some. Hell, everything I put in fell out of solution. Everything. And I mean, it turned into this giant. First, it was white, and it turned into this giant yellow. The only way I can describe it is like a like soft paraffin, like almost like beeswax that
Right.
was.
I'm sitting on your pictures where you
Well,
were
here's the thing.
yeah, where you were describing
Nothing
all that.
dented it.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing dented this damn thing. I mean, I got naphtha like real crazy hot too. I mean, it was almost at its boiling point. I mean, it was hot, and it still wasn't breaking it down.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden it hit me, and I was like, holy shit. So I basically put industrial vinegar in, which is like
Oh,
30%. At first, I'm
yeah.
like, it's not doing anything. Well, then all of a sudden, I started shaking. Oh, it completely broke it down and dissolved it. Well, so now, once again, chemically, so now you have an acetate. And you've got to get it out of that. So, you have to put a base back in. And so
Yeah.
I just use sodium carbonate. And I mean, thank God, the first time I did it, thank God I had it in a large freaking beaker, because let me tell you, I dumped that in not thinking, and the reaction that started. And so here's the thing. It's so, I threw all this in, and basically you put it in until you don't smell that vinegar anymore, because you've now neutralized the acid.
Right.
And so I basically took brand new, because I recycle my naphtha all the time. I'm like, why waste it? I mean, I don't give a shit that it
You
turns
should.
bright.
You should always recycle if you can. I agree with that.
I mean, if you're doing a freeze per sip, and then, you bring that out, of course you got to evaporate then. So you're always going to lose some. But I'm like, bro, you just, I'm like, it doesn't matter that it's yellow. And I'm like, and you can take some of that out by washing it through like sodium carbonate. And I really don't give a shit. It is what it is. And
Right.
I'm like, but I used brand new, fresh freaking naphtha. And I'm not kidding you. I mean, literally the minute that naphtha went in, that stuff is so charged. It's like the naphtha turned yellow. And I mean, in like a millisecond.
Right. Nice.
And so then when I did it, you see the pictures. It's so much more white, and the crystals are really small, but they're like so pronounced.
Mm.
But I feel that the reaction body wise is very much different.
Yes. Yes.
Very, very, very much different. Oh, it's a lot more speedy.
Mhm.
It's like
Has more
when
legs to it. Yeah.
oh yeah, it's like literally somebody cuts the restraints on the freaking roller coaster in an instant, and you're dropping down there. You saw the one thing I posted, like when the acid goes from 0 to 100 way quick. Oh, it's like that. I mean, it's going from like hello to ludicrous speed, and it's just like, holy shit. Um, and so that was in a cart. My buddy came up, and so he was like, dude, did you try any? I said, raw. I said, no. And so I was like, all right, fuck it. Let's do it. And so we went in, and I mean, I did one hit out of my concentrate rig that I use. And I looked at him, and I was like, holy shit. I was
Mhm.
like, dude. And I'm like, not tonight. I was like, dude, that's that's going to sting. That one's, I'm like, that's going to catapult you over the other side. Like you're going to be pulling G's when you pull up to your first freaking ending. And I was like, wow. But you're right. Like I learned that like, it's almost like we were granted the little bit of novelty fun in the beginning where it was
Right.
like, oh man, I mean, I can remember it 2-3 times in a week where I was sitting in my living room like, okay, that's the craziest shit I saw until 2 days later. Then that was the craziest shit I ever saw. And all of a sudden it was just like, that's not there at all.
Right.
And I'm like, and it's like, I figured it out. It's like, okay, that was like the little free ride that we get. That's, courtesy. Now it's time to put your big boy pants and big girl pants on. It's simple as this. I've
Yep.
learned it like, yeah, I learned like if I'm seriously seeking something, that's what it's meant for. It's not meant for just like the Friday night, Saturday night, like, hey, let's get together and all break
Yes.
it and break
Not,
through.
not a
Uh-uh.
party drug. Not a party drug.
No, this is it's personal. It's a
Yes.
personal thing.
Yeah.
It's a real, like I've talked to so many people like, dude, you are crazy. You really should have somebody there, that has a set of eyes on you if you're planning on really trying to break through. They're like, dude, in case something goes wrong. I'm like, dude, are you kidding me? I'm like, shit's so crazy looking once I'm on the others. I'm like, I don't even know if I want to know what you look like when I'm like, and it's personal. I'm like, I'm not worried about it. I'm like, dude, shamans don't have a bunch of people hanging out with them. I'm like, dude, these sons of guns will walk way out into the middle of the desert or a jungle. I'm like, and they're out there all alone. And basically they go into this. I'm like, dude, like there's shit in that jungle that'll eat them. And they're off on the other side on aisle. They ain't worried about it.
Right. They're
I'm
protected.
like, it's a personal thing. I'm
Right.
like, and it's,
I'm a solo tripper. It's hard for me to trip with a group of people just because of I'm a solo tripper because I'm also like a heavy tripper. Like
oh yeah.
acid,
So,
I'm gonna do as much acid as I possibly can because I want the balls to the wall effect. I want to go through the roller coaster journey that you go all the way through, all the hit the bottom, and you come back, have to crawl your way back up.
oh,
Like I like those
oh,
journeys.
oh yeah, and I mean, you talked, and that surprised me. I wasn't ready for the answer that you gave me yesterday,
Right.
and I said, and you were like, oh my god, you were like, Lucy's like, that's my pat. I'm like,
It
oh
is.
my god,
I have a
it,
passionate love affair with Lucy. I do.
oh,
Yes.
and I still to this day, like my buddies are like, dude, you're crazy. They're like, you're 53 years old. I'm like, so what the hell does that mean? I'm like, Dick. I'm like, so I'm like, quit aging me. And he was like, dude, you can't be dropping doses no more. I'm like, says who? I'm like,
LSD.
he's
Yes,
like,
I can.
I'm like, dude, I'm like, you eat fucking boomers. What the
Yes.
fuck is the difference? He's like, but he's like, acid's different. How the hell is it different? I'm like, I know exactly what's going to happen. I said, I've learned, I mean, you and I talked about this. I mean, that's the thing about boomers that are so deceiving. Like I've had like a freaking 2 gram or a gram and a half one, the most pristine. I mean, like it's the poster board for a freaking boomer. And
Yeah.
it's the ride's okay. But then I have that one little ugly one in the bag that you keep shoving to the corner the whole time because it's ugly.
I love
And I mean,
aborts.
you end up like it's all you have left at the end. You're like, and you eat that thing. The next thing you know, you're under your kitchen table steering the planet with your big toes.
Yes. Yes.
I mean I'm like, dude, I'm like that little tiny one that's going to kick your ass is worse than that big
Mhm.
one. But I mean, I know. Okay,
Yep.
well, it's 200 UG. It's 200 UG piece dose. I'm pretty sure I know about how tight I need to put my seatbelt on this one. Um,
Yes. Exactly.
but you
Exactly. I can, I know enough on how what UGs were going to do what to me. I also know what kind of acid, but how it's going to react to my body. I know, yes. And this is why I like acid so much more than anything. Like if I had to give anything up besides marijuana, acid would be the thing I would keep and I would probably get rid of everything else.
Honestly, so would I. I really would. Except maybe, I mean, except maybe mask. There's
Well, yeah,
something.
that. Mhm.
It's it's kind of like all of everything rolled up in one. I mean, the Native Americans
Agreed.
in our country, oh, they had that shipped out in. I mean, listen, there's plenty to be said about ayahuasca, but let me tell you, I mean, the mess to me, it's like the best of an acid trip. It's the best of being on
Yes.
mushrooms. It's the
Yes.
best of it. Like it's like then throwing in a freaking sprinkling of Molly on the other end. Um, I mean, you get like all of them, and like I tell people, I'm like, dude, you don't understand. I'm like, they're like, yeah, but you puke. I'm like, dude, the ride don't. I said, let me tell you, the ride gets real fun when you start puking. I'm
Right.
like, like it's just part of it. But yeah, you're right. And I mean, I was always a heavy tripper too. I mean, like
Mhm.
one of my closest friends, and right now we're at odds. I mean, that's things that like that's happened over the years.
Sure.
You get tired of each other's company, and he's in right now. I mean, I love him to death. I mean, that'll never change. But he right now is currently walking around with his head up his own ass, and I'm
Yeah.
just sick of dealing with patting him on. I'm like, dude, you keep doing this, and then you want me to like put you over my shoulder and burp you. I'm like, that's not happening anymore.
Yep.
I'm like, bro, I'm like, you put your own head up your ass, deal with it. Um,
Hey, how
and
did you
so, but
find? Tell me, how did you find DMT World?
okay, so of course I got my first cart, and next thing you know, it's gone. Real
Right.
bad experience. So then the guy that I got it from online basically screwed me over the next time. Um, so let's just say this, because the internet's just a horrible, wicked, evil place. Oh, I think I lost probably, I don't know, 1,000, 1,500 bucks trying to find, DMT and its carts and everything else. So I found put it in through DuckDuckGo. It was a YouTube clip. Something for sure, he was English guy, and he's talking about it, and he tells, he's like, dude, he said, you need to make your own carts. Now he basically said, here's the deal. He's like, I have a reliable source on the dark net, and so that's where he goes. But he goes, they're far and few between. He goes, the dark web's just, it's all bullshit. And so he was like, there's places that, and the whole, so, and he kept saying this. He's like, you should really think about teching your own. He was like, but I can't tell you how to do this, because he was like, YouTube will probably pull my channel. But he's like,
Mhm.
there could possibly be a link, and like he's pointing at the top corner, and you could see like a link pop up. And so, I go on and I'm watching. He's like basically saying, okay, this is, and he was like, you will find, he was like, you're going to find a bunch of very good information. And basically it was you and in the Nexus. He was
Nice.
like, go to these two places. He was like, you will find a treasure trove of information to talk you through your journey of dealing with this. Because he was like, basically, I can't tell you on here, because he was like, I'll get booted, and I'm like, okay. So
Mm.
Nexus was the first place I went.
Right.
And of course, like I said, I'm a reader. Um,
Right.
and so, I ask about, because what I learned was in my reading is many times as I got screwed over trying to find the DMT, well, all of a sudden I'm like, well, all of a sudden I start seeing these things like on Reddit, and they're like, dude, there's people that are ordering bark from places, and they're basically getting like bark off a Mississippi mudflat tree.
Yeah.
There's just as many counterfeit places out there selling bark, and I'm like, holy shit, I am like in
Yep.
such unknown territory.
Yeah.
Um, and so I basically, I read the rules, and so I threw it out there. I mean, oh my God, their admin was on me like in a minute. And he was like,
Mm.
there's no solicitation of anything or sourcing of anything illegal. And I'm like, bro, I understand. He was like, maybe you need to read the rules better. And of course, I was like, okay, well, page 2, paragraph 2. But basically, I'm like, this is what it said, motherfucker. And I'm like, dude, technically, it's still legal in the United States to have bark. I said, now, granted, I'm sure that somebody's probably trying to do their best to see where and how much of it goes where and who and how, and because they've got nothing better to do and they've got to spend their taxpayer dollars somehow. Um, but I'm like, dude, you, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. Like, they're going to look and be like, okay, so, 1,000 K, a kilogram of bark to this dude. He's ordered here or there. Yeah, that's a personal user that's basically, to them sitting somewhere fairly subdued now, and it's okay. All of a sudden, but they're seeing like somebody buying like 85 fucking pounds of bark every 2 days or 3 days. I'm
Yes.
like,
Those are the people they're looking at. Yes.
yeah, exactly. I'm like, bro, it's not illegal. Oh, he gave me this whole rash of shit, and he was literally like, okay, simple as this. It's being noted that you've broken the rules, and basically it was like, repeated behavior like this will get you banned. And I'm like, you're an ass.
Wow. They
It's like,
thought people think that we're strict strict on DMT world. That's crazy.
it's like you're an asshole. I was like, literally, you're an asshole. Now, granted, I mean, they have, if you go to the research side, I mean, Jesus, you're talking, pages to compile stuff.
Oh yeah, Nexum is a great resource. Is a great resource for people. That's why I will always give them the tech link to it at Nexum, because it's a great place to go and get information, especially if you're a reader.
But I'm like, I want to say to him, I'm like, bro, so like you're telling me I can't talk about this shit, but yet you got all the papers on it to tell me how I make it. I'm like, so I'm supposed to learn how to bake the cookies, but then I can't tell you how happy I am about how they turned out. I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, how do you think? I'm like, you guys are dicks. I'm like, holy shit. If you're going to give me the information to tell me how to do something, well, then you should be like, yeah, we want to fucking hear how'd that shit turn out.
Yeah.
Like you said, and I've learned this, there's a great connection, like you had said about the connection with, getting your own bark and, kind of becoming one with that whole process and, and with, changing a plant. Well, I usually have a garden every year, and like, I'm passionate about hot peppers. And like, I have grown some like crazy boomer crops, but I mean, I find a connection with that too. There's something about like Mother Earth or itself. I mean, like, let me tell you, I mean, like, oh yeah, I'm as happy as can be, like when I'm out there just sitting in a garden and, I mean, I'd be just as happy, if it was freaking a bunch of indica plants sitting there. It's there's fruits to the labor.
Right.
Like I'm real old school. Like I love anything like that has to do with fermentation, canning, pickling, things like that. And so I was like, I grew all these crazy hot peppers, and I'm like, okay, I'm like trying to find the best hot sauce recipe, and I basically came across. It's the recipe that they use for Tabasco sauce, and
yeah,
they're literally like the only company that will just readily give it out. If you go to Avery Island and take a tour, and you're like, bro, can I get the recipe? They'll probably be like, yeah, sure. And then they're like, yo, man, send us an email, let us know how that shit turned out. I mean, that's how you guys were. I mean, I'll never forget. I mean, I came on and I was like, okay. I mean, my ass was already clenched tight, and I'm like, don't know if I'm breaking the rules. If I am, please tell me. But I'm like, where can I find bark? I mean, literally, you were. Well, of course, I figured this shit out. Well, of course, the admin was the first one to say hi and friend me. Then you were the second one, but you're the same person. And I was like, okay. And, and another fine gentleman, you're like, prime bark. I mean, that changed everything. And I'm like, okay. And I mean, yeah, I would have a serious problem. Like, I'd be like, yeah, listen, there may be an issue. Like if all of a sudden, like I'm making, taking some DMT, and dude, all of a sudden you're banging and selling it for profit. I'm like, dude, that's an issue. I'm like, I don't think there's any, so what? I'm like, dude, who am I hurting if I text some and, it's for me? I'm not hurting anybody.
Yep.
I'm not adding to this problem of crime, and it's just me.
Right.
And I think that, like I said, there's something more to it than, like I said this to you, like I mean, I hear all these the youngsters, and they're like, oh my God, man, like, there's this awakening happening, and and like, and I'm like, bro, yes, there is. but you really should be careful because let me tell you, I'm like, dude, a lot of people I know, when we get to see what's really, when we really awaken, there are going to be a lot of people that ain't ready to see what's on the other side. I can tell you that.
Yep.
There's a magnitude of something that's going on. I mean, I look at this once again. I'm not a conspiracy nut. But and I mean, I've read plenty of it. Do I think there's connection between the human pineal gland and
Right.
and everything else? And I'm like, okay, so let's look at this here factually. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not a conspiracy nut. I just look at shit and call it for what it is and bullshit. Or I'm like, okay, so at this point, there's epic percentages of fucking aluminum present in our atmosphere, in our environment now that we're never, I mean, just that are on epic proportions. I
Yes.
mean, so like, there's like, they're finding like up like in the Alaskan range. I mean, they're finding like snow that's on mountains that have 6,000 times the amount of aluminum that it should. And they're like, you don't understand. It's in the snow. They're like, it melts every year, dumbass. They were like, so this new snow comes back. It shouldn't have any. Where's it coming from? So you find out, but it has detrimental effects on your pineal gland. So does
Yep.
fluoride. Well, imagine that, you got fluoride now. It's in your toothpaste. I mean, it's proven fact. Look it up. It's out there. You can
Right.
find it.
There's actually documentation.
Not,
Yes.
there is not one stitch of documented proof that fluoride in toothpaste helps prevent tooth decay. Not one.
Right.
And what I find funny is, okay, so let's go into massive fluorination of, municipalities' water.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you're doing this. Well, here's the thing. I've seen test results where the fluorination in water is 6 times what it is in toothpaste. What you would like but it's funny. Turn a box of toothpaste over and it says, if ingested, call the poison control center immediately.
Right. Isn't that
Well,
wild?
but you have tap water with 6 times the amount in it. But yeah, I didn't get any memo from the water company that says, hey, bro, if you drink some of this water, you try and call the poison control center.
Yes.
I'm like, okay, wonderful. So you find all these things, and you're like, I'm like, my buddy's like, well, aluminum, contributes to Alzheimer's. I'm like, no, it doesn't. It's just as simple as this. I'm like, they just, after cutting open the brains of a bunch of Alzheimer's patients, they found way high elevated levels of aluminum.
Right.
That didn't cause it. It's just there. I hate to tell you, you or me probably have the same elevated levels in our bodies as well.
Yep.
And I'm like, we as a whole, the United States is pretty much the only place that still calls Alzheimer's and dementia.
Right.
Anywhere else, it's recognized for what it is. It's basically type 3 diabetes. Your brain becomes insulin resistant.
That's right.
And it's as simple as this. You don't lose your memory. You lose the ability to access your memory.
The memory. That's right.
But
That
once
is
again,
right.
here's the thing. What do they find they think causes this? Well, things in high saturated fat, produced foods, sugar. Wow. And look at what we're being fed.
Right. And then we're being
And
told,
I'm like,
we need to lower our cholesterols. Oh, we need to cut out our salts. Oh, we need to cut. Well, these are the things that we are cutting out of our systems that actually help these types of things. And so we've eliminated those.
Well, I read an article where they said literally long time ago, there was no such thing as bad and good cholesterol. They work in conjunction.
That's
and
right.
for a healthy body. The problem is our diet and what we've been forced to be to put in our bodies has changed that so drastically. I mean, so here's the thing. So I can't remember the name right off the top of my head, but the human brain is basically made out of this substance, the majority of it. Well, the majority of that substance is cholesterol.
Yes.
I'm like, so the human brain is I'm like, okay, so the thing that you're telling me is bad in my body is what my brain's made of. I'm like, okay. Salt. Oh yeah. Avoid salt. Okay. Are you kidding me? I literally read a guy's article and he goes, literally the whole thing of that the government and the forces that feed us, that this is what you should eat to stay
Mhm.
healthy, is pretty much do 180 degrees of that. Do the exact opposite if you want to
Opposite.
remain healthy.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Um, salt's the terror. Don't stay away from salt. The human body needs salt to stay properly hydrated.
Yes. Yes. It shuts our
Um,
kidneys down if we don't utilize it. It shuts our organs down if we take it away from our system. Like, yes, I just don't understand how we've had such bad advice from those powers that be that supposedly know so much in these areas. And
well, go ahead.
no, what were you going to say?
Yeah, well, so like, and I've learned this reading papers, and
Mhm.
one of the things I would tell anybody this. Okay, um, if you're going to go to the dark web to do some shady shit, dude, you should pretty much get prepared to just get bent over and get screwed. Because that's just how it works. I mean, it's great, it's the whole anonymity thing, but that
Right.
also works this way. You don't know who the hell is on the other end either. Like you could be conversing with an agency that you really don't want to talk to.
Right.
Um, but what it does have is it has an amazing amount of access to uncensored information.
Right.
Um, so I would tell anybody, yeah, it's a great and resourceful tool, because there's piles of information on anything that you can think of that hasn't been tainted and censored. Which, let me tell you, I mean, that's a big issue. I mean, like, I literally know people that if they didn't see it on the news, well, then it just can't be fucking real.
I know people like that too.
I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, I saw Denzel Washington did this thing it was years ago. I don't even know when, but I mean, that's what he said. He goes, he said, like, I think he said his father told him, back in the day, if you didn't read the newspaper, you were uninformed.
Yes,
Now, if you read the newspaper, listen to the news, you are misinformed.
that's right. Yes.
And like my sister's a doctor, and I've had that discussion with her, and she's like, well, she was like, but look at what the studies say. And I'm like, okay,
Oh,
well, who made the studies? I'm like, sweetheart, you can make a graph of numbers lean any way you want to when you're the one making the graph.
that's
I'm like,
right.
I'm like, are you? And she was like, I'm like, well, she was like, well, s- uh, doctors saying, I'm like, well, how many doctors? She's like, well, like, it was like I'm like, so 100 doctors out of like all the doctors in the world are saying that. I'm like, really? I'm like, I don't think that that's like called a consensus. I'm like, holy shit. Um, and I mean, I'm like, you see it time and time again. You can make anything lean that whichever way you want. And it's just like the separation from the truth. But I know this reading, just the other things we eat. So everybody's like, okay, GMO. Okay, so no big deal. Genetically modified organism. Well, people are like, well, they did this so that corn is more resilient, doesn't need as much water. It's more resistant to pests, stuff like that. But it grows bigger and grows more corn, which feeds more people.
More people.
Okay, well, sure, that's great. But what I've also learned is, let's say that corn carries some sort of really nice particle in there that they find combats cancer or something else. They'll genetically modify that to ship. They'll modify that right out of it.
Right.
And it's just like, I mean, people think there's this great diversity in the grocery store that we go to. There's like 5 major food producers in the United States. It's all coming from one of them five. There ain't no diversity.
That's right.
Watch the movie Food Inc. And I wanted to go into the food. I wanted to be a chef for years. A guy that I went to that was a couple years ahead of me in school. When I grew up, like, I was the follow around kid. I was like, there wasn't many kids in my neighborhood. All the ones that were here were primarily about 3 or 4 years older than me. So, and I mean, that's any young boy. They always want to
Yeah.
hang out with the kids that are older.
Oh
That's
yeah.
just how boys are. You want to hang out with the guys that are doing the shit that you're not allowed to do because they're a little bit older.
Correct.
Um, So it was, it's, I don't know how to say it. And so, um, where was it? And where was I going? So I have my other phones out here, and it just
You
beeped. It was my
wanted
mom.
you wanted to go in, you want to be a chef
Oh yeah. So
when you were younger, and you were the
so
kid that hung around
yeah,
with everybody because there was quite
yeah.
a age difference.
So
Okay.
now I remember.
Okay,
Anyways,
good.
when he graduated from high school, he went to Johnston in Wales, which is up in Rhode Island. It's a really good school, and so that's what I wanted to do. And I mean, I look back. I mean, for God's sakes, back then it was like $60,000 a year.
Right.
And I mean, it was a pipe dream, and my mom, I mean, it was just my mom. I mean, it would have been crazy. But I mean, first of all, I wasn't ready for any of that stuff. But I mean, I had a passion for cooking. So, but him and I sat down one night. We used to, like, every Friday night we get together and we drink some beer and smoke a lot of weed, and we'd watch some crazy movie. And this was back in like when Blockbuster existed and shit like that.
Yep.
And so, but he got his hands on the movie Food Inc. And he was like, dude, it was horrifying. I mean, like,
Yeah.
I'm like, holy shit. And he was like, I know. He goes, I watched it already before it came down. He goes, dude, I literally want to like not eat or drink anything ever again. But he was like,
Mm.
and he looked at me, he's like, you think we could just survive on beer? And I'm like, oh, there's probably a whole nother movie about beer and like, like the nasty things that they do in that industry. But I mean, like
Yep.
it's a proven fact. I mean, it's all about manipulation. I mean, and just in an epic scale. I mean, me as an addict, that's how, and, I mean, I think, you went brief reading what you were saying last night. I don't know how bad your addiction was, but as addicted people, I mean, that's how we survive. You
Yeah.
manipulate people to get what you want. I mean, listen, I was a pro. I could walk in a room of 50 people that I had screwed over like 10 times already that were all pissed off at me. And in 30 minutes, I
Mhm.
could walk out of there and I had gotten everything I needed from each and every one of them. And
Yep.
and they'd all been looking at each other like, wait, what the fuck just happened?
What just happened? Yes. Yep. Yes.
Do that. I
I
can remember
was.
people like, dude, I'm not giving you money anymore. And oh yeah, guess what? Yes, you are. You just don't know it
Mhm.
yet. I mean,
Yep.
it was crazy. I'm like, but that's how I'm like, you go into a grocery store. I mean, they are specifically geared to force you into the bullshit than to where the stuff that might actually be good for us is at.
Yeah, absolutely. It's true.
And it's all about us. I mean, it's the furthest away. And we as a people, we're in such a fucking hurry. Well, shit, that extra 100 feet, that's too fucking far to walk. I'm in a hurry. Well, a
Yes.
hurry for what? I've heard this from people from other countries. I mean, and you probably have too. I mean, I'm fairly I mean, I'm not well traveled, but I've met a lot of crazy people, especially at dead shows.
Yeah.
Um, and they're like, we have never met a people that are in such a fucking hurry to go nowhere.
Oh, yep.
They're
And
like,
they don't
dude,
know
you
why.
guys are like a million miles an hour, but to do nothing.
Yep.
They're like, what the fuck? They were like, we get wound up too, but we got an objective,
Right.
and I mean, and they are. I mean, I'm just like, oh my God, there's no time for anything anymore. And I truly think that's how they want us, totally dissimulated. Um, I mean,
Yes.
like there was a couple of years ago, I was up to visit my father, and he lives in a town right up of Harrisburg. So here, you've probably heard of Harrisburg's. It's the capital of Pennsylvania.
Oh,
Um,
yes. Yes.
so there's a small town right next to it called Mechanicsburg. So my dad, I went up to visit, and he was like, "Let's go get something to eat." He goes, "There's a new restaurant that just opened." He goes, "I want to see how their breakfast is." And I was like, "Okay, cool." So we went and we're sitting there, and we were talking. And all of a sudden, he looked at me. He goes, "Look around." He goes, "Look around in here." And I looked around, and he goes, "Every single fucking person in this restaurant is on their phone and or a tablet and are absolutely not communicating or being physically involved with the person they're sitting at the table with."
Hmm.
He was like, other than you and me, and there was a couple that were sitting right down from us. They were probably in their 70s or 80s, and we're sitting there talking to each other. He goes, we're the only ones. Everybody else is doing their, you go to eat with you go to eat with people, you're on your phone doing your own thing. I mean, we're so just untuned each and disassimilated from interacting with people.
Yep. We'd rather sit on our phones and not have conversation with the person that is right in front of our face, but we'll have these conversations with people on our digital devices while we're supposed to be in person. Yeah, it's wild to me. It's crazy.
Well, and here's the thing, and so, and you know, everybody's they're on. I'm like, dude, that information that's on there could be tainted and twisted any way that somebody else wants it, and that's what you see. I mean, like it's ingrained in us. I mean, it's like to go to school in the United States. I mean, people don't think about this. So you go to school, you're not taught to think outside the box.
Right.
You are taught to go to school, graduate, and become a cog in the fucking wheel.
Right. Factory workers. That's what did public schools were designed for.
And here's the deal. Oh, you may succeed a little bit, and be way better off than that guy. But guess what? You ain't near way off good enough where they're at. You're just another cog in another fucking wheel.
Yep.
I'm like, they don't think we're not. I mean, that's how it's crazy. Same thing. And you probably read articles on this. It's all about frequency and the hertz.
Yes.
Well, music would normally be at what is it, 438 or something like that?
437.
All musical instruments though were tuned to like 440 or whatever, which it's a proven fact. It creates massive. Yes. Oh, it creates massive chaos inside the human body.
Yes. Yes.
Really? Okay, so you look at the whole big picture. Once again, it's all coincidence. Okay, so we're having things that we hear, the frequencies, which you with energy. And I mean, I know just empathically when I meet people,
mm-hmm.
I mean, these are big key freaking factors.
Absolutely.
And so things, we have frequencies tuned to where it's not good for us.
Yes.
We have things in our food and we drink that do another thing, and it's like, okay, so there's a reason for this. And I said this to you once. So we're one of the only. So we have a brain that now they've rectified that and say, oh well. And I mean, it's amazing. It's like I look at things and I'm like, really, it's a coincidence again. Mm-hmm. Like all of a sudden now, like they find out the truth about the pyramids, or all of a sudden now they're like, oh, well, we really do use all of our brain. Okay, so for so many years, we had a brain that we only use 10% of. Well, one of the things you learn in school, and this is, I mean, it's true fact, nature doesn't waste a damn thing.
Right.
Nature's so perfect. I mean, you're born like me. Someday I'm going to die, So I lay there on the ground and I rot. Well, as I'm laying there, things are going to eat me. It's going to nourish them. They're going to survive. Be able to have more young. At some point, I'm into the soil, and now things grow better, but then the things eat and they die. That everything's a life and death cycle, but it's harmonious.
Yeah.
But now,
well, that's like plants. When a poisonous plant grows somewhere, there's another plant that grows that is the antidote for that other plant. Yeah. And we see that it's everywhere in nature.
So my question is, so we know that nature doesn't waste anything, but yet we got a brain that we're wasting 90% of. Most other organisms, let's just primates, dolphins, stuff like, they pretty much use all their brain. Yeah. But we don't. So is it that we don't use it, or is it that somehow, unbeknownst to us, we've been taught or basically
purposely have
that we can't use the other 90%? And I'm like, okay, interesting questions. So, you start to think about things. Like I look at things. I mean, it goes all through history. And once again, I'm like, I'm a total numbers guy. I don't know how, the consensus about the Great Pyramids were, It took 10 years to build them. Okay, cool. So, let's look at Khufu's, the biggest one. Okay, so great. The stone was mined like 80 or 100 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they used the theories and they used logs to basically roll these giant stones to the Nile. Well, okay, so last time I checked, it's a fucking desert. I don't see a whole shitload of trees around here anywhere.
Right.
Second of all, you're going to put these giant 90-ton blocks on a barge on the Nile and float them down. Okay, gotcha. They made papyrus and reed boats. I'm like, okay. So, but here's the thing: it's just the numbers thing. So, Khufu's basic. There's like 2,300,000, just shy. It's just shy of 2,400,000 blocks.
Right.
Okay, so if you're going to do that in 10 years mathematically, that means they had to mine, move, and place one block every 60 seconds.
Wow.
And so you're going to try to tell me those numbers don't add up. I mean, my question is, okay, so we know this. Egyptians love their hieroglyphs.
Right.
I mean, they put them things on everything. It was like graffiti. But yet when you go in, there's none inside the Great Pyramids.
Right.
And where is the giant stone sarcophaguses that their inner coffin was in? Well, I read papers and I've read articles like, oh, well, the freaking the Tomb Raiders took them. I'm like, so you're going to tell me these guys, they're professional thieves. They broke in and now they're going to freaking drag a 9-ton stone box out that ain't worth shit. I'm like, really? Yeah. And I'm like, and they did it without like any damage. I'm like, things just don't add up. Like, they found there's pyramids in Croatia.
Right.
There's a place in China. I don't want to go. I have it saved on my phone, but I don't want to try to get to it because I'm afraid I'll lose you. But I'm looking at this. I mean, there's like a dozen pyramids that are there. And I mean, they're grown. I mean, they're overgrown. Like, so here's the thing. You want to tell me, so we have multiculturals in this planet. So, we have the Incas, the Mayas, the Aztecs. So we got all these South American indigenous things, like empires, and they have pyramids just like in Egypt, but yet they never met each other. But then you look at certain things like in their hieroglyphs that there's a lot of resemblance of certain things and
similarities. Yeah, absolutely.
Like, once again, it's that whole, I know it sure as hell looks that way, but just trust us. It's a freaking coincidence.
Right. And then for years, they keep telling us over and over and over again. And so we've been programmed into these to think that this is the way it is. And there's no other way that it can be because this is how it's always been.
Oh, yeah.
That drives me crazy.
There's so much shit. Like, I'm like, I start reading things and then like, sometimes like my mind wanders a little, but I mean, I look at shit. And once again, I'm like, there's certain things you just learn, like, so I was reading this article that, once again, there's a lot of people that say like the whole key to this whole thing's in Antarctica. Well, I'm kind of, once again, I'm like, I might have to agree with you there because, boy, man, it's fucking freezing cold down there and there ain't shit there, but man, they're doing their best to like be down there. And then I question it. I'm like, okay, so it's all the sovereign countries that are, there's no private enterprises allowed to be there. It's all, research labs from sovereign nations of the world, except the Rockefellers. I'm like, really? I'm like, well, I thought there's no private people. But I read an article. So it sure as hell looks like a pyramid down there. And, you see the tip of it, article I read. And if you would do the math on it, so this thing would be about 4,900 feet tall, and which would make the base of it like 2 miles by 2 miles by 2 miles by 2 miles. That's pretty damn big. And
yeah, it is. Ooh, yeah.
You learn, and this is truth. I mean, so some things you learn in school aren't bullshit. There's certain things that nature really fucking hates, and that's straight lines and 90-degree angles.
Right, because they don't exist.
You got the tip of this thing sticking out, and they're like, well, yeah, it does look like the top of a pyramid, but that's from wind and ice erosion. And I'm like, okay, so the angles are so perfect. They're only off by like thousandths of a degree and the straightness. I'm like, holy shit. So they're the straightest lines. I mean, we'd have trouble doing that shit now with lasers, and yet ice and snow and wind made this happen. But yet we all already know that nature does not like straight lines. I'm like, really? It's another one of those, where I'm literally like, just so you know, I realize that you are pissing on my back, and don't try to tell me that it's raining. Rain's not warm. I mean, I'm just like, it doesn't make sense. I question all kinds of crazy shit. You would think, I mean, space travel for us, for instance, space travel. We want to go to Mars. Well, the biggest hindrance is getting out of Earth's gravity.
Right.
It eats up fuel. Okay, well, we were at the moon in the 60s.
I don't know how, but
why were we not already back there to build just we're 1/10 of the gravity. Dude, to get to Mars now would be totally doable. But yet we were already there. But why have we not gone back? Why are we, we're wasting all this time and money on a space station.
Well, because they said that they've lost the information, the technology. They don't know. Supposedly they've lost all this.
Well, so once again, I'm a numbers guy. So this was on the internet. This was supposedly on the internet, and it got scrubbed. So I can tell you this: I'm not real computer versed. I know you are, but from what I read, you got to be pretty damn powerful to basically erase something off the internet.
Yes.
To make it that there's no trace of it. I mean, that you gotta have some clout. And
you gotta know the right people.
So, but there were still articles that you could find. So Werner von Braun, he's the godfather of rockets,
Right.
Another questionable thing. We got this horrible world war, and then we go over there, and the guys that are responsible to make these, we scoop these suckers up, and like there's huge war tribunals over there. People get hung, but yet we're like, oh yeah, but that guy made rockets. We'll take him with us. I'm like, are you? It's like people got freebies. So he made the statement. So basically, it would have taken about 4,000 tons or 4,000 tons of fuel. Basically, the Saturn rocket, and NASA said to get to the moon, and NASA at one point stated the same thing. Saturn V rocket only held half of that.
Oh.
I'm like, so once again, I'm like, so you're going to tell me, how the hell are you going to tell me that my car is going to get from here to there, and it takes 100 gallons of gas to get there, but yet my car is going to get there and it's only got 50 gallons of gas in it? I'm like, it doesn't make sense.
No,
and I read people. And so this is a weird thing. So, empathically, like I can pick up on shit from people like you and I right now from a conversation.
Right.
I've picked up on people that I know, friends' emotions. Like I didn't even talk to them, and like who knows how long. And all of a sudden I'm like, holy shit! Like, and I can figure out who it is. And I'm like, okay, so is it that they're projecting it over that much of a distance? But it's weird. So I almost feel like I pick it up. So watch some of the footage from like when they came back from the first moon landing. So you have Neil Armstrong, you got the other guys.
Right.
Dude, if I was just on the moon, I'd be like, holy shit, motherfucker, Dude, these guys are sitting there like they're looking down at the table, just kind of fumbling with their hands, which I read body language real well. Right. And I'm like, yeah, you motherfuckers are totally bullshitting. And when you listen to the responses given, I'm like, that shit is so scripted. And I'm like,
even there have even been interviews later on where they have been asked questions about going to the moon, and they totally evade the question. Like they won't answer the question. And there are things like, they'll say things like, well, if you think we did, things like that. It's like, what did he just say?
And there's other things that don't make sense. I'm like, okay, so when you have like a satellite body around a planet, gravities deteriorate over time eventually.
Right.
Most moons, if I'm correct, like, they're getting a little bit closer and closer to their mother planet, because she's bigger and her gravity is eventually just going to win. And, and it can, but yet our moon is just kind of hanging out. And it's also, we're locked in this perpetual that you never see the other side of it.
Right.
I've read some articles where, so there were some asteroids that were
we
basically.
write songs about it. We've just never seen it.
Well, and there were some meteors. I read an article where there were some meteors that they knew were going to basically impact the moon. And so everybody was watching. They wanted to see what was going to happen. And I read an article where the one place they said that basically with a radio telescope, they said that the moon rang like a fucking bell. Oh. And, I'm like, there's just things that just don't make sense. And so I watched the thing. And once again, what's real, what's not anymore. But, what I would tell anybody, watch it all and then form your own opinion on just how your own gut's telling you.
Yeah.
So there was a guy, there was a bunch of stuff lost, on these moon landings. The videotapes and everything else. He was like, they have the transcripts yet. And he was like, basically they were told that you're going to see shit up there probably like, whatever. And so he's like, there was code words and like, I'm watching it and they're literally like, they're going to the moon like the second time. And literally at one point they're like, NASA, there's a Santa Claus, and the guy's like, these are words for seeing things. And, I'm like, there's just things that don't make sense, and right. I'm like, so yeah, there's a guy, I read the book when I was in jail,
you had some time.
Not one of my better moments, but I can tell you, I ate like a fucking king. God bless my mom, with commissary, but I read, all these guys, everybody, all the young, they want to get in there. They're all going to work out and get real buff and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, dude, shut up and just give me all the books you got in your locker.
Nice.
And so that's what I did. And, I'm reading and, there's just, reading on all this stuff. And they're like, there's a guy. So there was a guy that bunked right next to me. He was gone. He was a state offender. So he was there just bidding his time till he got what they call his green sheet. He was going to go back upstate. And he was like, we were talking about books and he goes, dude, there's some good ones. He was like, Behold a Pale Horse. Yes. He was like, but you can't get that upstate. He was like, it's on the forbidden, the forbidden book list. Mm-hmm. He was like, I bet you can't get it here. So I called my mom and she was saying there's a bookstore right by us called Books A Million. And so the prison, they're right real close to where York County Prison's at. And so, book, that's where pretty much they'll tell you if you want to send books to any of your people that are in you go to Books A Million and they know how to do it. Anyway, so I called my mom and I said, see if you can give me a book that's called this. And so next thing you know, I called her the next night. She's like, oh yeah, they had it. She was like, you'll have it this week. And so, I get it. And this guy's like, oh my God, well, it's by a guy named Bob Cooper. And I start reading this thing and I'm like, holy shit.
Was it the uncut version or was it the edited version?
I proudly can say that I have the unedited, uncut version.
Gosh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful because that's a very hard thing to get nowadays. Because all the ones that were out there, they took ones that were out and they remodified them and took out, and I don't even know what they took out of it.
Well, yeah, and and I was unaware of this. Now, my neighbor, when we were growing up, and like I said, this how you look at how the chess pieces are being moved. And I'm like, him and I've talked about it. He goes, it's for a fucking reason. Oh, yeah. He was like, there's things at play here that are manipulating shit. And he goes, something's coming. Something's is coming. And he was like, if you look, he was like, it's like two opposing forces. And he's like, something is coming. And the other one is manipulating chess pieces. We had a huge, growing up, he's the first guy I ever smoked pot with. He's like 4 years older than me. Well, yeah. As life went on, we had a serious falling out. And let me just tell you, when I saw him the last time, and I'm just going to be as rude as I can about this, I wouldn't have let him lick the sweat off my balls if he was dying of thirst. And that's how bad I hate it. And let me tell you, I know there was no love lost coming from the other side. Well, so I found out his father, so he didn't live there anymore, and my neighbor came over that lives between us, and we're it's three houses, so there's one house in between us, and he came over and he said, "Hey, did you hear that so and so passed away?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, no." And growing up, my father, when he still lived here, and my friend's dad, oh man, they were thick as thieves. They were always drinking beer together, and like my dad would come down to visit me every once in a while. Like if he'd stop by, he'd leave, and my neighbor's dad, this guy's dad was in the yard. I mean, my dad would be sitting over there for an hour talking to him. So I called my dad, and well, so then I started seeing some activity at the house, and my employer, he's a real estate nut. And he said to me, he goes, "Bro," he was like, "if you see your neighbor there, ask him what their intentions are for the property." He said, "Maybe we can save each other some money and just do this privately." He goes, "But I'd be real interested in looking at it." And he has his own reasons for that. But, I said, okay. So I kept looking. Well, I saw a work van there from a construction company. He's a superintendent that works for one of the rival companies that we compete against, my company competes against. But so I see it over there, and I'm realizing there's some stuff done. Well, so I'm leaving my house the one day, and I'm going to the grocery store to grab a few things. So I go tearing out of my driveway, and I was baked as hell. And I'm heading over to the grocery store, and he's coming the opposite direction in his car. And I'm like, the glares were there, and we get to the store. I don't even think about it. Well, he had beaten me over there. Well, as I'm walking in, I see him walking in front of me. I'm telling you, Happy, I just wanted to do, I'm like, fuck this. I'll come back later. I didn't even want to see him. I couldn't stop walking. I'll tell you, there was literally something pushing me. And the only out I had was going in that fucking store that day. I really don't think that I was being given another option.
Right.
And I could feel that. Once again, empathically, I feel things, and I'm like, okay, but where am I? It's like I'm feeling it from something that like you can't see or touch. It's weird. And so next thing you know, I'm walking in this store, and he's right in front of me, and I made a snide comment, and he turned around and we started talking, and he started telling me about how his father died, and this guy is like rootsing and teared up. And so growing up, like I didn't have much money. Like I traded off a bunch of my worldly possessions to this guy for weed. And so a couple months later, I'm out. I was given a new van for the company I work for. Once again, I've got the king of our fleet, and I'm a crazy guy. And so he kind of gave me carte blanche and do with it what you want. And so, he financed some. Well, I've financed a bunch myself. And so I built my electrical, I have spotlights in it, all kinds of crazy shit. And so I built an electrical control panel.
Oh,
for
nice.
Seat to control. So I'm in my driveway, and I see him drive by, and all of a sudden he stops right at the bottom of my driveway. And I'm like, oh, Jesus. I'm like, I really don't feel like talking to this guy now. And he comes up, and within 2 minutes of our conversation, he pulls out this little pocket knife. It was given to me by my grandfather. It was a stocking stuffer. And I traded it to him. And we're talking 40 some years later. And he's like, I had to give this back to you. And I'm like, holy shit, you still have it?
Oh.
And I mean, I went in and so I'll never forget. So when I came home from the grocery store that first night, this is when I realized something was happening. And so I walked in, I said, hey, Mom, I said, I saw George, this guy, his name's George. I said, I saw George at the grocery store. I said, he bought his parents' house. I said, he's been over there doing the work, because I said him and his wife are moving in. And she looked at me and she's like, how do you feel about that? And I looked at her, I said, you know what? I said, I'm totally fucking okay with it. And it was weird. So we had a huge power outage here. So I got the pocket knife from him. And so we had a power outage here one night. Bad storm. I was working down in Maryland, real quick offshoot. So I'm in Maryland doing a job, beautiful big house. It was like $1 million renovation. And tornadoes came through this area, which is kind of a rarity and so we're down there and it got so bad, the weather, I'm in my van loading up to go home. And I mean, it's really ugly looking. And like this tree branch falls on my van. I still have the dent in the roof. It was huge. And I'm screaming for my partner at the time. I'm like, dude, we got to go.
Right.
And we go to pull out, and it was blowing so bad. So it was like a dirt lane. And so there was trees in front. So we sat there and literally we watched a bunch of these pine trees literally get ripped out of the ground. And my buddy's looking out the back of the van and he's looked at me, he goes, son of a bitch. And this was my friend that did my first batch, like my first tech with. We were up all weekend. And I mean, I've known this guy forever. He's the one that still is walking around at the present time with his head in his ass. And he looks at me, he goes, son of a bitch. He goes, I'm going to die in this field from fucking tornado with your ass in the van with him. And he was like, we got no beer to drink and no weed to smoke. He's like, ain't that a son of a bitch? And I'm like, dude, so it was really bad. And so like, it took us forever to get out of there and get home. Well, when we got to the main highway, which is it's an interstate, it goes through goes through from Baltimore, from down at the Inner Harbor at the bay. It goes up into us and up above Harrisburg. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it looked like war footage. There was, I mean, like I'd never seen anything like that in my life. I mean, just the debris and shit like that. And like, we're heading up north on this interstate. Southbound lanes are closed because there was literally trees that had gotten yanked out of the ground and hurled into the middle of the highway. And so I get home, all of our power's out here. And I'm in Pennsylvania, like 30 miles from there. And I'm my mom's primary caregiver. She's pretty much blind and she's here panicking, and you know, the house is dark. You know, and I'm like, holy shit. So so basically I'm trying to figure out, how am I going to keep things going for the night? So I thought, hell with it. I'm going to go use the company account, get a generator, and I'll just pay him back. And I've done this before. Right. He gets a little pissed at me, but he always knows I'm going to pay him back. And there wasn't a generator in the store. And actually, the one that was left, the guy was in front of me when I was checking out. He was from the area. He lived in the area of Maryland where I worked that day, where it was the worst. He's like, dude, so I bought what's called a power inverter. And so anyways, I'm wiring it into my van. Well, I just out of the blue, I'm like, you know what? I wonder if he's awake. So I call my neighbor. I'm like, you awake? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, dude, my power's out. He's like, let's drink beer. And I'm like, okay. So he comes over and we're talking, and it is going from a place. He looked at me at one point. He goes, Matt, he goes, this is like storybook shit that like you and I are living through together. Like how our relation. I said, dude, do you not see this? I said, the pieces, how they're being moved. He goes, oh, I already saw. Because when we were growing up, like he started getting these ideals on like just how things didn't make sense. And hell, we all thought, I'm like, dude, I said, dude, I used to think you were freaking conspiracy nut crazier and shit. And I said, now I pretty much believe everything that you did then. I'm like, holy shit, you know.
They're not theories anymore. They've all come true.
That's the thing. Like I know some conspiracy nuts, like true conspiracy nuts. Yeah. But he looked at me and goes, I'm just a realist, dude. He goes, I look at shit and I'm just going to tell you, dude, it don't make sense. I don't care how you explain it. It's don't make sense. Right. And I'm like, I look at it that way too. But I said, but then the empathic part of me, I look at a person, I'm like, dude, I knew you were lying the minute you opened your mouth, just because I'm feeling your energy and what's coming off of you. Yeah. You know, and I'm like, okay, so what's this? I'm like, dude, the man behind the curtains, man, he's working real hard. And I'm like, dude, how did that many people not see this? And, you know, I talked to a guy and he goes, well, it's simple as this. He goes, most people, as long as it doesn't affect their little perfect bubble, they don't give a shit.
They don't pay attention. And
No.
when it's not, when they can't see what's happening is because of technology, and now we're able to see what's happening on a real time, and we can actually see it, and everything's moving so quickly. We're now not having time to process, but we're seeing things in a bigger picture, and so we're starting to see the connections of the dots. And that, I truly believe, is due to technology and the access to data and information and places that we've never had access before. And those of people like you, who is smart enough and data driven and actually can see those things, we're the ones that are starting to wake up first. Is what's happened.
Yes, but once again, then this goes back to my whole thing of more. It's happening more now than it's ever happened.
Ever.
And
Yep.
like, anybody that has a brain, when something like this starts to happen, it's because something's gonna. There's something coming. There's
definitely something coming. Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I'm like, it's weird, I'm like, and part of it makes me laugh. I'm like, okay, I'm like, are the powers that be, the chess people, the chess players, are they okay? So now all of a sudden we're going to give things to veterans. Man, we're talking people who, when they're operating, okay, they're the toughest, most driven people on the planet. Let's give them mushrooms to help them now with their PTSD. I'm like, really? I'm like, so the people who are going to be the strongest and have the ability to defend us and keep, I'm like, you're going to give them something that's going to do this. It's, and like you had said to me, you made a statement when you cross paths with them. And I said to you, I said, I see I see tears in the fabric, like almost of time. Sometimes I'm looking at shit and I'm like, my buddy said to me, he's like, you can jump interdimensional. You say dimension walkers is what I think your term, is that what you called it?
Yes.
He was like, bro, he was like, there's times where, I don't need DMT. I said to you, you want to talk to somebody, you want to talk about freaky. Okay. So you see your oracle, and I've talked to other people that they have one specific entity that seems to greet them or be there waiting for them.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, wait till I've seen mine on this side.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the first time that happened to me, literally, like, I lost a day. Like, I sat there for like hours thinking, like, holy shit. And I'm like, I'm not crazy. And here's the thing. So for me, like, there's, when I'm over there, like, my brother that's on the other side, I don't know, it's, or my guardian, whatever.
Yeah.
I can smell them. It's weird. Like, my sense of smell is really crazy. Like I can smell shit, like, and it's weird, but like, I can smell them. And that's the first time I thought, oh my God. And I saw him, and I'm going to say it's him, because it seems very masculine, and just how it carries itself.
And then it probably is. It probably is a male energy.
But on the other hand, how do we know, or how do you, and yes, it's some sort of energy, but how do we know it's male energy? There may be no different. There may be no differentiation.
I don't know. I think there is. I think there is a difference between the male and the female divinity. So
okay,
and so that's energy, and that's also encapsulated why we have male and female in our society, in our world, and that's how because it talks about in a lot of different places where it talks about, it talks about the splitting of the soul, the splitting of the energies that are split, and those are what brings you back to your we try to find our twin flame. We try to find because in theory that it's the two, it's what the merging, the merging
Well, yeah, they
unmerged.
were. At one point we were one, but then split into two. But
Exactly.
the whole purpose is to go back into oneness again.
Exactly.
It's crazy. So I saw a thing, one night just watching. I watch my phone a lot at night, and just random shit. It was this black guy. It was in this room with all these women, and he was basically, he was telling them, he was like, this is, he was like about how, he was like, he was like, you don't even know what men really want. And this guy, I was like, holy shit. He was like, you think that we want, something with big boobs and, the 3 hours of you getting ready to look like you do. He goes, he's like, that's not what men really want. He was like, and they just don't realize this. He goes, but at the core of it, he goes, it's what it really is. And she was like, well, what do you really want? He goes, I want my fucking rib. And like, no, I was like, holy shit. Not one of these women understood, like, say, what? They're like, what the fuck? And he was like, I want my rib.
Right.
And I'm like, holy shit.
That
and
makes
he was
sense.
like, I don't care what she looks like. If she's my rib, he goes, she's the one that's going to make me the most badass motherfucker that's on this planet.
Yeah, that's true.
And so, this all goes back to, and you're correct. So like, I mean, the adage that the woman makes the man, dude, there ain't something that's never been more truly spoken. Because you're talking about becoming one again. It's a shared energy that, I mean, you're pulling off of each other. I mean, people don't understand that. Like, I mean, how energy spreads and how, it's a force to be reckoned with. Like I can see it around people sometimes. I mean, I sense it empathically just differently than you do. I mean, like I know an individual, like he's like totally like he sees the aura around people. Like, and I'm like, dude, that's gotta be badass. He's like, literally, he's like, dude,
not all the time.
he was like in the beginning, dude. Yeah. He's like, it gets a little fucking old every once in a while.
It does. And when people find out that you can see, you can read auras and see them. Oh my gosh. You know how many times people come up to me and they're like, so you can see auras. So what does mine look like? And I'm like, it doesn't work like that. Like, it's not I'm going to look at you and I can tell you what your aura color is and everything about you. It doesn't work that way. Sometimes, to shut it off, sometimes you just want to shut it off because I don't always want to see what people, kind of like probably your empathic ability. You don't always want to see or feel what's happening.
And I've had people come up to me and they're like, oh, so you can sense what people, and you can sense, they're like, so what am I thinking? And I'm like, doesn't work.
It doesn't work that way.
I don't know what anybody's thinking, but I said, I can tell what you're feeling. And I'm like, and right now I said, I'm feeling that you're a pain in my ass. I'm like, it doesn't work that way. But like, there's times where like, I'll be around somebody and man, it'll hit me like hard. Like, I'm like, holy shit. And sometimes it's amazing. The obstacles, I mean, there's like things in the way, and like usually I can filter through it and I can say, okay, I'll bet my life on it that this is what's going on. And like I've met people and I'm like, let me just ask you something. And they're like, dude, how the fuck do you know that? And I'm like, I don't really know.
I just know it. I don't know how, but I just know it. I say that to a lot of people. They're like, how do you even know that about me? I just do. Something like, I know.
I want to, like I hear so many youngsters like, oh my God, they're like, people just don't understand how psychedelics are going, how they heal you. Just, I would tell anybody, brother, you are so wrong. Sure, there's some benefit. The healing comes from within you. Period.
Yep. So just a tool.
What the psychs help do is remove the obstacles that are implanted in the way of getting to that healing.
Right.
That's the trauma. Right. And Oh, and oh, for sure they can most certainly, you know this as well as I do. They most certainly can ease the pain that you're going to feel getting to that healing as well.
Yeah.
Because most times it's going to sting real bad, and I think subconsciously that's why people stay where they are and the healing hasn't happened, because they've already had a taste of how bad it's going to sting, and their body, it's fight or flight reaction. Their body's like, we ain't ever going back there again.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
they don't, it's like you could ask them, they know that they don't want to go over there, but they can't tell you why.
Mhm.
Well, I can tell you, you've subconsciously, you've already felt this before. And, I mean, that's one of the things, like, going through AA and stuff, oh, well, you're supposed to make amends with people unless it can cause them or you physical harm or pain. And I'm like, bro,
Yeah.
I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Let me
Mhm.
just tell you something. If you want to make amends with somebody that you have royally fucked over, oh,
Mhm.
it's, and I can tell you this, you better be prepared, because this happened to me personally. You better be prepared for wanting to make things right with somebody who really means something to you, and they look you in the face and say, fuck you, I hope you die.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
bro, that's going to hurt in a way you ain't ready for. But
Yeah.
through that fucking hurt comes a healing and like a recentering of yourself that you ain't ever going to get any other way.
Mm.
It's like you got to go through the fire to get cleansed and made whole again.
Absolutely. Okay.
And-
We're past the 3-hour mark.
oh my God,
believe,
have we been out?
believe it or not. I've never
Are
talked
we?
to anybody that long on the podcast, and that's really cool. But let's end this. Let's end this because it's been 3 hours and I need to go do some other things. But what I want to ask of you is, at this point in time of the podcast, this is what I let people in the community, whatever you is on your heart that you want to tell the community people who will be listening to this podcast. What is it that you would want to tell everybody?
I would tell anybody. I mean, as crazy as it sounds, I mean, just listen to what's going on in your own head. I mean, it's listen to your heart. It ain't going to lead you wrong. And you just, I don't know really what to tell anybody. Just follow what, if you listen enough, your inner body, your inner soul is going to tell you what you need to hear. Follow your heart. Stay true to yourself, and you can't go wrong that way. Just it's simple rights and wrongs. Hold the door for somebody.
Yes.
For karma, I don't care what karma's real. It's simple as this. You get back what you put out. I mean, if you put out good energy, you're going to get it back. We're just too impatient. It may take 10 years. It may take a day. It may take 10 years. You're going to get it back though. And it's always tenfold. I mean, I look at where I was, and would ever think that I have the incredible relationships that I have already? I mean, like when I first came to DMT World, and like people were like friend requesting me. I was like, dude, I was like excited. Like it was like cool shit. I'm like, damn, somebody wants to like be my internet friend. Like I'm an old fucking person, I'm like, and this guy's for sure like in his 20s, but he was like, I'm like, damn, that's cool. It was really cool. Just don't lose sight of what is really what you should be keeping your eyes on. We're all missing the big picture, I think, somehow.
I agree.
I mean, I told you, there's no way that my meeting with you is by chance.
Yes.
No freaking way. I don't give a shit how you want to explain it. I look at this, I'm like, damn, they're moving the chess pieces pretty damn proficiently here lately. So, I mean, you and I have way too much in common. I mean,
Yes.
I'm just like, that's what's happening to me here lately. With my neighbor, I mean, like my bond with him now is so tight. I'm like, okay, this is really freaking weird. And I'm just like, every day I'm strapping in, getting ready for the ride to get launched.
Nice.
So, and
Well,
and you said to me about, well, we may have to change that to get me to Chicago. I'll bet you the odds are that I'll end up in Kansas before that happens.
we'll see what happens.
So,
Well,
but
with that being said, I'm going to end this, and I'm going to tell my people out there that are listening. Oh, I hope you enjoyed this 3-hour interview with Matty, and keep ascending, friends.